Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
The bus crash, authorities say, happened at approximately 5:30 p.m. Sunday evening at the corner of the Bypass and Service Road near Racine County Women's Correctional Center. While no significant injuries were reported for those in the car involved, the condition of the escaped convicts is uncertain. Chief of Police Mitch Fitzpatrick has issued a warning for all residents to stay at home until the prisoners are apprehended. Presume any and all of the 8 escaped convicts to be armed and dangerous, and contact Racine County Police immediately with any sightings or information. Again, assume the escaped convicts are armed and dangerous, and until we report that they've been apprehended, please stay indoors.
Dude, this is crazy. Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I think so. These cheddar Triscuits are freaking good, man. Why didn't they think of this like...
No, that's not it. Have you not heard a word of what's on TV?
Triscuits are crunchy, man. Mostly I just heard crunching.
Oh, God. I took a deep breath and refocused on the TV. They had already switched to a different news item. Something about a Little League game, like that mattered. Like anything else mattered. The prison, man. The ladies' prison. 8 ladies escaped. What if...
Wild shit, man.
He picked up the remote and changed the channel. Three's Company, Chad's favorite. Are you not hearing what I'm saying to you? Chad stopped chewing. Slowed down at least. He looked like he was thinking. Uncharacteristic of him.
Oh. Becca?
What if she's one of them? She could be on the loose right now. You remember what she said to me, don't you?
Oh, man. Something about your dick.
No, after that, man. And that's not true, FYI, not even remotely. Not that it really matters right now.
Huh? Well, that's the last part I remember, dude. Kinda stuck with me.
She said she's gonna kill me, remember? Oh, gosh. What if she's one of them?
Oh, hold on. I remember now. She goes, I'll cut your dick off and bury you in the woods. Or the other way around. I don't remember.
Ramblings of a lunatic. But look, she was serious. At least when she said it. Do you think she's still crazy enough to do it? Oh, man. I need a chamomile tablet or something.
Hey, do you have any cheese? Here's what I'm thinking. We melt the cheddar cheese on the cheddar Triscuits. Queso Supremo.
Do you even hear what I'm saying to you? If she was on that bus, she could be headed here right now. To kill me, Chad.
Come on, you really think so? And it might not even be her.
Maybe he had a point. How many prisoners were in that place? So 8 of them escaped, but out of how many? What was the chance one of them was Becca? It had to be pretty small, and even if she was one of them, what was the chance she'd actually come here and make good on her threat? She'd surely get caught again if she did. Could she be that unreasonable? Hey, if you were her, if you'd just escaped from jail, where's the first place you'd go?
Me? Oh, probably Taco Bell or something.
Say you weren't hungry, though.
Same answer, dude. Tacos for later.
All right, after that. What would you do after that?
Well, you gotta change your clothes and stuff, right? Or get a disguise or something.
He suddenly took on a conspiratorial tone.
You gotta cut your hair, dye it a different color, you know? Grow a mustache. Well, not a lot of time for that. Get a fake one, maybe. But nothing too flashy. You gotta melt back into society, you know? Like cheese.
With this comment, a flourish of his fingers. So you don't think she'd risk coming here? It'd be stupid, right? The motive is right there. The cops know what she said to me. The cops could be posted out there right now. It'd be like walking into a trap. She's got to know that, right?
Well, hold on just a second, dude. See, that sounds reasonable to you and me, but you're projecting our thoughts onto her. If she's totally batshit, none of the above might apply. Terms and conditions. Know what I mean?
Well, you're not making me feel much better. I started pacing the room. On TV, Mr. Furley stood dumbfounded by the bedroom door while Jack and Chrissy barked double entendres on the other side.
Fucking Furley.
And here I was, a man who had always found the stakes of three's company near the peak of my endurance. And now I was staring death in the face.
Well, here.
Chad said. He dug the stump of a joint out of his pocket and held it out to me.
Take a hit, man. You'll feel better.
You know I don't do that stuff. I need a chamomile tablet is what I need. Darn it, have you seen where I put the bottle? I started shuffling through the junk on the kitchen counter.
Can we try smoking it at least?
Hey, put the news back on, will you? In case they have any updates or anything. He grumbled but changed the channel. Almost immediately, I heard,
Police have just issued an update on the 8 escaped convicts from the Racine County Women's Correctional Center. As of this report, 7 of the 8 escapees have been apprehended by authorities. It isn't clear whether they were caught or turned themselves in, nor do we know the identities of the prisoners involved, nor the ones still on the loose. Again, citizens are urged to remain indoors and report any information to Racine County Police.
There you go.
Chad said.
Can I put my show back on yet?
7 out of 8, I said, mostly to myself. Well, that's pretty good, right? I mean, if the chances were low before, now they're like, how much lower?
I'm not so great at math, dude, but I'm gonna say like 700% better. Seriously, got any cheese in this house?
It's still not 0, though. And think about it. If 7 turned themselves in right away, the 8th is like she'd have to have something in mind, you know?
Well, they don't know whether they turn themselves in, they said.
Well, that'd be even worse. Maybe Becca was the only one tough enough to escape. Oh, gosh. Where the heck are my chamomile tablets?
Whoa there, partner. Take it easy a sec.
Chad got up from the couch. That kind of caught me off guard. He doesn't do that often.
Listen, I know you've always refused to talk about what happened. I've asked you like 10 times and you don't want to tell me. I understand that. But it's time to come clean right now. If I'm in this with you, I gotta know. Why are you so afraid of this chick?
I stuffed a bunch of junk mail in the garbage can. Didn't even care about recycling it right now. It doesn't even matter, Chad. All you have to know is she's crazy. She's not well.
You told me that already, man. That's the same thing you said after I spiked your Shirley Temple with like 5 of those chamomile tablets of yours. Which don't do shit, by the way.
What? You did that to me? When?
Cabbage heads, like 2 months ago. And hey, that's me coming clean with you, all right? Now it's your turn to do the same. And you better. 'Cause I'm the one who knows Kung Fu here, all right? And if I'm gonna protect you, I need to know what I'm up against.
I sighed and leaned on the counter. He was right. Right in a way, anyway. He'd beaten Kung Fu on NES, and I wasn't sure that would translate so well. But if he was going to sit this one out with me, I supposed I owed him the full story. All right, I said. There was always something bubbling under the surface with Becca. You could sense it, like she was never too far from going over the edge. She kept it pushed down, but like anything else, the truth eventually comes to the surface. Like holding a beach ball underwater, you know?
I'm listening.
She'd always make some comment when she thought I was looking at other women. The slightest glance at a waitress or a store clerk or whoever, and she'd give me those eyes. Like a predator ready to strike.
Jealous much?
Extremely. Even though I'm the last guy on earth who'd be unfaithful. And I thought that after enough time went by, she'd understand that. And maybe then she'd loosen up a little.
So what the hell happened?
It was a magazine, man. She'd found it in the bathroom. A grin spread across Chad's face.
You left a magazine out? Oh man, I gotta see this. Hustler, what do you got?
No, nothing like that, Chad. A Victoria's Secret catalog, okay?
A what?
You know, the underwear stuff.
I know what it is, dude. So what's the big deal with that?
I guess she saw my name on the address label, realized I had subscribed to it. He paused while the implication slowly soaked in. Then he chuckled. Look, it was years ago, all right. I guess I'm still on their mailing list. They just show up every once in a while, that's all. Maybe the recycling bin was by the curb all that day.
You dirty dog.
Oh, come on. Anyway, she came out of the bathroom with her pants still around her knees. She was so mad. She had the catalog rolled up in her fist, and she was squeezing it so hard I thought it'd turn back to wood. And she said to me, "You're just like all the others, you cheating son of a bitch. And you know what I did to the last man who betrayed me? The same thing I'm going to do to you." And then the whole thing about, the stuff you said before.
And that's when she beamed you with a toaster oven?
I pulled out a chair and sat down. My knees were wobbly just recalling the incident. It could have been worse, much worse. Here's the part you don't know. She wasn't lying about that other guy. The police dug it out of her and ended up finding him right where she said she'd buried him. I escaped with a bump and a few stitches that night. This other guy, they found his bones in a shallow grave. She's not in there for assault, Chad. She's in there for murder.
Whoa. How did I not hear about this on TV?
Well, it wasn't on Three's Company.
Good point.
It was never more than a local story in the Green Bay area. And I was glad for that because I was humiliated.
Hey man, I'm sure lots of guys subscribe to Victoria's Secret.
Not because of that, because I had dated a murderer. And it gets worse. I peeked at the TV briefly, but no new developments. Just some piece about the weather, as if that was the big story tonight. Just as they were leading her out the courtroom in chains the day of the verdict, she looked right at me and said it. The second she gets out of there, she's doing the same thing to me.
Holy shit. Hey, why didn't you just tell me in the first place?
I dated a murderer, man. You know what that feels like? It makes me feel radioactive.
Hey,
He put a hand on my shoulder.
it's all good. I dated this girl once. She had, skin tags.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, I don't know. But Becca probably isn't even the one who escaped. I mean, what are the odds? There's probably hundreds of girls in there. The one who made it out is probably some serial jaywalker or something.
You think?
Yeah, totally. Bus crashed and she jaywalked on out of there. She's probably in some hotel room watching Three's Company right now. Speaking of which...
He went for the remote, but a breaking report stopped us both in our tracks.
Just breaking. Police have released the identity of the prison escapee still at large and believed to be somewhere in the Brookfield area. Rebecca Sanderson, 35 years of age, 5'8", 135 pounds, is serving a 40-year sentence for murder and should be considered armed and extremely dangerous.
Holy shit.
Chad said, "Me? I couldn't cough up a word if my life depended on it." There she was on the screen. Not the girl I had dated, but some prison-hardened approximation of her. I saw she had developed a taste for facial tattoos over the past 3 years, but it wasn't that sent the prickles up the back of my neck. Not the tattoos themselves, but what they said. A skull on her left cheek with text on its cranium reading, "Fuck you, Kevin." A bloody meat cleaver on her right cheek emblazoned with "Kevin's little dick," and something like a banner scrawled across her forehead like a single extended eyebrow. It read, "The minute I get out of here, Kevin, you're dead."
That forehead one's pretty on the nose.
Chad said, "We gotta call the police."
We've just received this footage from a surveillance camera outside Wauwatosa Hardware on West North Avenue. Here you can see Miss Sanderson punching through the plate glass window and climbing inside. And this video here, you can see Miss Sanderson coming back out with what looks like a chainsaw, a few hammers, and I believe that's the handle of a machete sticking out of her pants there, much less discreet with the chainsaw. And here she is from the camera at the nearby Taco Bell gas station. Looks like she's got tacos and a can of two-cycle gas. Police are warning all residents to remain indoors and report any sightings immediately.
Yeah. Police sound pretty good right now.
All right, listen. Make sure the doors are locked, windows too. I'm calling the cops.
Your windows chainsaw-proof by any chance?
Go quick. And you know what? Hold on. I opened a drawer in my kitchen island and rooted around until I found it. A good heavy rolling pin. Had to be 3 or 4 pounds. My grandma's. I handed it to him.
Oh, thanks.
He said.
Anyone comes after me with a chainsaw, I'll just protect myself with this piece of wood.
I was already punching the numbers into the phone. Just hurry. Go.
Or maybe I'll just make some dough or something. God help us both.
Chad went off at roughly the speed a pothead would exhibit to save his life. Still, we needed all hands on deck right now. I finished typing in the numbers and listened to the phone ring on the other end. Before long, it picked up.
Brookfield Police, can I help you?
Hi, this is Kevin Applebaum, 2100 West Hadley Street. See, in regard to the prison escapee, Rebecca Sanderson, I believe she's coming here, right now, to kill me.
Is this a crank call, Mr. Applebaum? Because crank call in a police station is a crime and can result in a fine of...
You seen those tattoos on her face, sir?
Ma'am.
The dispatcher said. Excuse me?
Ma'am.
The dispatcher repeated.
I'm a ma'am, thank you.
Well, it's no crank call, ma'am. I assure you. Have you seen those tattoos on her face? They're about me. I'm Kevin.
Oh, with the little dick?
First of all, it's huge, okay? And more importantly, she's going to kill me, like, soon. There was a commotion at the police station then. Several officers speaking urgently. I could hear it muffled, like the dispatcher had her hand over the speaker.
Mr. Applebaum, we're sending a unit to your general area. Please remain safely indoors until you hear back from us, okay? I repeat, do not leave the house.
My general area? What do you mean by that? I need police over here right now.
Miss Sanderson is quite elusive, Mr. Applebaum. She's been a step ahead of us ever since the accident, so this is good. Since we know she'll be showing up to kill you, we're using you as bait. We'll have an officer watching your residence from a distance, and when she shows up, we'll move in.
But what if he doesn't get here in time?
He's almost done with his meal break, Mr. Applebaum. You just sit tight, okay?
Just then, I smelled the pot smoke wafting across the house. I told Chad not to light that up in here, but right now I had much bigger problems. All right, but please hurry.
We will, Mr. Applebaum.
The phone disconnected, leaving me alone with my fate. And Chad. I smelled the smoke, Chad.
I'm stressed, all right?
He came trotting back, dabbing out his joint with moistened fingers, and sprinkling ash on my carpet as he did so.
Windows are locked, doors are locked. I don't hear any chainsaws. She's probably saving the gas for your ass. Hey man, I never did shit to her, okay? Let's get that clear in case she busts in here like a goddamn lumberjack.
Nobody said you did, and neither did I. It was all just unfortunate, okay? Anyway, the police are en route. They're going to be watching the house in case she shows up. And seriously, thanks for sticking around through all this. You're a good friend. I realize you could have left as soon as you heard the report.
Well, not really.
Chad said. What do you mean?
I ordered a pizza. I'm starving.
A pizza? For delivery?
It should be here any minute.
Well, don't hold your breath. There's a county-wide stay-at-home order in effect.
It's essential services, bro. People could perish.
So could the delivery guy, Chad. Believe me, there's no pizza coming. And that's when the doorbell rang.
Told you. Hell or high water. I'll go grab it.
Wait. How do you know that's the pizza guy? It could be her. It could be Becca. Chad checked his watch.
30-minute guarantee. He's right on the money, man. It's gotta be him.
Just hold on a minute. It could also be the cops. Put that joint away, will you? He stuck it under the side of his hat. I snuck through the foyer with my back along the wall farthest from the front door and into the nearby mudroom. I got near the window facing the street and peeked through a crack between the curtains. Little Caesars. Chad was right. Pizza guy.
Told ya.
I went to the front door and opened it. The delivery guy made no attempt to hide his disdain for having stood there so long. Sorry for the wait, I said. You know, with the escaped convict and all. Just being careful.
Afraid of girls, I guess? Figures.
He slid the pie out of the bag and handed it to me. What's that supposed to mean?
Means that'll be $12.50 plus tip.
He didn't pay online?
Nah, nobody paid. That's a hula Hawaiian, plus delivery, plus tip.
I fished a 10 and a 5 out of my pocket and forked it over. Keep the change.
Thanks. And hey, watch out for naughty girls, huh?
I ignored the smart remark and grabbed the doorknob. But just as I was about to turn away, I heard the chainsaw.
Kevin, you lying, cheating son of a bitch!
She emerged from the darkness like some spectral bringer of death, and before the pizza man's pizza warmer even hit the ground, the chainsaw was lodged in the crook of his neck. Hot blood sprayed me in the face, and for a moment I couldn't even move. All I could do was stand there and watch the spinning blades tear through the man's orange shirt, turning it a bloody black in the moonlight, and his head tilting almost coyly to the side, and the effect disappearing entirely when his eyes met mine upside down and finally fell on the porch. Then the rest of them fell with it.
You didn't think you'd see me again, did you, Kevin? What have you been up to? Catching up on back issues, you sleazebag? Tugging your little prick?
No, it was never like that.
You're all the same. And now you're gonna answer for all of them. Oh, I've been waiting so long for this.
Only then did my legs decide to obey me. I slammed the door in her face and locked it. Ran back to the living room where Chad stood, pushing his shoulder against the door to the back porch.
She barred it, dude. It's totally jammed.
You gotta be kidding. Let me try. He was right. I could see through the door's window that a 2x4 had been slid through the porch's rungs. How long had she been lurking around here? A window! We can go through a window! But before I could even decide which one, the front door hit the wall, and the growling chainsaw was at full volume.
There's no escaping this time, Kevin. Good luck with the windows. 5-minute epoxy's on sale, by the way.
Fuck. Dude, break the glass. It's the only way.
But it was too late. She was already in the doorway, chainsaw revving. Now in the light, I saw the prison-hardened face who used to be my girlfriend. All of that underlying anger and craziness no longer restrained. Unabashed and embraced, in word and in deed. Her eyes full wide around pupils so dilated they seemed solid black. And of course, the tattoos. Fealty to the god of my demise. Oddest of all, a fake mustache. And this she peeled off and tossed on the floor.
And now I reveal my true form, the harvester of evil, to make fecund the earth with the blood of the unfaithful.
Holy shit, she's bananas.
Chad said. Becca, listen. Nothing but the truth here, okay? I honestly don't know why you got so bent out of shape over the catalog. Maybe you thought I was comparing the ladies in there to you. I don't know. Or that I found them more desirable than you. But none of that could be further from the truth. We had a real thing going, you and I. And when you threw the toaster oven at me, that really hurt. I'm not talking about how it bounced off my head either. I mean in here. I touched my chest to show her the extent of my injuries.
He hasn't made pizza bagels ever since.
Chad said.
Not just 'cause the oven's broken either. It's been real hard for him, Becca.
He's right. It hasn't been easy. It's just a shame it all had to happen this way. The chainsaw still idling in her hands, her expression seemed to waver, not unlike the unsteady 2-cycle engine. All it would take to set off either one, a mere squirt of gas. I could not let that happen.
Why do you look at them?
She asked.
Why do you look at them instead of me?
This is what you never let me explain. What I'm looking at and what I see are two different things. I was shopping, Becca. How was I supposed to order you lingerie without looking at it? Without picturing you wearing it? It was supposed to be a surprise, but I guess that ship sailed long ago. A solitary tear dripped from her eye, ran down the cleaver tattoo indicated for my genitals.
It's too late.
She said,
What's done is done. It can't be fixed.
and albeit diffidently, she fingered the throttle. A splash of gas-scented gore freckled the table and the TV screen.
Wait, Becca.
Chad said, reaching into the side of his hat.
Just one last thing before you chainsaw my friend here. Maybe you're right that things can't be fixed. But sometimes you gotta see things from all angles, you know? From different perspectives. I mean, this whole thing is like a comedy of misunderstandings, you know?
He put the joint in his mouth and lit it. Took a long drag.
Here.
He said, and keeping his distance as best he could, he held out the joint to her.
I know it's been a while. Let's see what the goddess has to say about all this.
She stared at the joint for a moment. I never remembered her being interested in such things, but then again, I never suspected her of murder either. Becca, it turned out, was full of surprises, and this continued to bear out.
It's been a while.
She accepted the joint and took a long drag. She held it in for a few seconds and coughed it out.
A real long time.
This stuff's the best. I call it the Song of Parvati. It's sour diesel sprinkled with Kevin's chamomile tablets.
What? What the hell, man?
Hey, I offered you some, didn't I?
Becca took another long hit, then a series of short ones, all held in like she was stuffing more socks into a packed suitcase. She held it in for a long time. Finally, she said,
The goddess Parvati. I think I can feel her.
The goddess of life's continuity. Can you feel her? Can you feel the moksha?
I can.
How about you, Kevin? Can you feel the spirit? The liberation?
He gave me a look that compelled me to agree. Yes. Becca reached out for the arm of my love seat and sat down heavily. With a look from Chad, the two of us sat down on the couch. Becca slowly raised the joint to her lips and took another hit. Then she weakly held it out and said,
I think I'm good. I'm like 1,000 pounds right now.
Chad made to get up and retrieve the joint, but it looked like a lot of effort to him.
Just throw it.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
My arm's real heavy.
Yeah, mine too.
I think I can kind of flick it onto the table.
Okay. Then I could just bend over and get it.
Okay, hold on.
She weakly lifted the joint to her lips and took yet another hit. Chad and I met eyes. His look said it all. I'm sure mine did too. After a minute or so, the idling chainsaw slid from her fingers and landed on the carpet. Still within reach, though. She had forgotten to flick the joint back to Chad. A live report threatened to break just then, so I quickly changed the channel back to Three's Company before anything showed up to harsh Becca's buzz. On TV, Jack stood flummoxed with his ear to the kitchen door while Chrissy and Janet's innocuous conversation from the other side suggested a lesbian escapade. And for the first time in a few minutes, Becca spoke up in her sedated fog.
I get it now. Sometimes you see things or hear things, and they aren't always what they seem like. I'm sorry, Kevin. I shouldn't have been so homicidal and stuff.
Oh, that's all right, I said. Relieved as I was, I made no move to get up. Not until the chainsaw by the love seat stopped idling would I even consider it. Her hand still dangled only inches away, and I knew her mood was as tentative as that trigger throttle. And then,
My God! Police! Nobody move!
my first instinct was to run for the front door and get behind the officer's gun, but better judgment prevailed in an instant. None of us budged, not even Becca. In fact, she was the one who spoke up.
In here, officer. Come get me. That's my mess out there.
I could hear the cop calling for backup. Gun drawn ahead of him, he made his way into the living room.
Nobody move a muscle. What the hell happened out there?
I'm the one you want, officer. Just help me get up, will ya? I surrender.
You two the ones who called the station?
I nodded that I was, like a freaking hour ago.
Good work, you two. I was on break. Thanks for holding down the fort.
Oh, no trouble at all. Becca went back to prison without any trouble, aside from the paperwork and subsequent media circus, of course. And with the new murder charge and the plethora of additional ones in the mix, I'm sure she'll be out of my hair for quite a while. I only hope they have a TV where she's going, and that once in a while she can catch an episode of Three's Company to remind her of the most vital lesson she's ever learned. It's funny the places from which these lessons come sometimes, and I hope she remembers in this life and the next that things aren't always the way they appear at first glance. Chad was right. Sometimes you need to just sit back, reflect, and see things from a different perspective. I don't always agree with the way he facilitates that shift in perspective, but hey, there's no wrong way to stop a bloody chainsaw. It's just a shame that poor pizza guy had to end up in the way. That said, there are certain matters I won't budge on, even at the risk of sounding like a hypocrite. Back on the couch with Chad, conducting his cheese on cheddar Triscuits experiment, I decided it was time to bring this matter to light. And Hulu Hawaiian pizza, Chad? Seriously? I thought Becca was the crazy one, but you might be the real pineapple.
Don't knock it till you try it, bro. Life's an adventure.
And sticking me with the bill on top of it. There's a classy move. He raised an eyebrow at me.
Huh? What do you mean by that?
$12.50 plus tip.
I paid online, man. You've been had.
Well, shit. Fuck 'em.
I light another cigarette. My lips pursed upon the filter. Draw the tobacco to ignite as my lungs crowd with smoke. I'd quit the habit some 10 years prior due to health provocation, which may explain why I choked and wheezed through the first pack. Yet as I remove the coffin nail from my mouth, I find I've adjusted to the cancerous smog quite nicely after a 3-pack warm-up. The numbness of shock still envelops my body as I stare at the cigarette staining my fingers and emitting the sickly bluish-white smoke. The smoke lazily ascends my index and middle finger, twisting briefly and curling in the air before joining the smog cloud held hostage by my apartment ceiling. All the while, my mind replays the horrid thoughts of yesterday evening without abating. To see me in my present state would be alarming, to say the least, for my hands tremble with epileptic spasms, my face affixed with involuntary twitches. This doesn't even take into account the wrinkled and soiled clothing which clings to my unfed frame like an ill child to his mother's bosom, or my hair, resembling a loosely bound fodder shock, deliberately ignored for lack of usefulness. And speech would be the most damnable of all, for it would flow in disjointed sentences of a high hysterical voice, devoid of sanity and saturated in urgency. Please, let me assure whoever is reading this account, I am not insane. Rather, I was not insane before the events of last night. As my shaking hands pens these words, I remain unsure as to my current mental status. Of course, who among us could be stolidly confident of anything after witnessing the horror I viewed? But I digress. My name's Alan Kittredge, and like my father and his father before him, I was born and raised in the Pentecostal lifestyle of a sleepy little town nestled in southeastern Ohio named Waverly's Crossing. To call the town backwoods would be unfair, for Waverly's Crossing resembled many other cities which were always on the verge of metropolitanism, yet restrained themselves for want of a simple life and basic moral values. We shared the same creature comforts as the larger cities of Cincinnati and Cleveland, but our town was not bound by oppressive metal and glass skyscrapers that stretched like Jacob's ladder to heaven and separated the populace by cold distance. Waverly's Crossing is a community in the greater sense of the word, and when my beautiful mother, Anne Carlisle Kittredge, birthed me in 1949, Waverly's Crossing beamed with pride over their new resident. Of my school years, there's little to report. I was above average as a student, who, despite my father's intentions, excelled in forensics and the thespian arts in lieu of sports-related activities. Do not misunderstand. I was not a fragile youth bereft of athletic ability. I was merely inclined more toward mental progression than physical expression. In 1967, I was bestowed a high school diploma and steeled myself for the ultimate fear of my 18-year-old life, adulthood. What was I to do now that I had become an official adult? I pondered this perplexing question one month before the United States government decided my course of action. Selective service. August lottery had called my name. I was to go to a small, turbulent country called Vietnam to keep the peace. At this point, I must declare I did not go to Vietnam with chivalrous notions of saving the free world from communism, nor did I go to experience the romanticism of war. I went to Vietnam because it was expected of me to do so. Had not my grandfather and father served before me? Was it not my civic duty to fight? I was simply doing what my lineage had set as the standard for future generations, and not because of blind obedience to the government. I went to Vietnam because that's what a Kittredge was supposed to do. Speculation of the correct moral agenda that'll have to wait for another day. My wartime task was as a crew member for our air troop transport. Each day, the crew and I would shuttle soldiers fresh out of boot camp from San Francisco to Saigon. Both gung-ho and reluctant warriors were released into the foreign deltas, their untarnished, naive spirits soon to turn hard in the unforgiving world of war. Yet, I was not to escape the devastation and destruction of the war. After the new arrivals had long departed the airfield and joined the conflict in the race fields, our secondary job was deployed. Though I was never to see battle, I was to reap the harvest sown by this malefic war. In the sickly, humid air under the blazing Vietnamese sun, our crew began loading deceased soldiers, swathed in olive-drab cocoons of standard U.S.-issue body bags. If I were to relate the most disturbing aspect of my experience in country, it would be the dehumanization of those brave men we filled our plane with like so much cordwood. I'll never forget the smell of the generic green plastic body bags intertwining with the stench of rotting flesh. The horrific aspect fell to the fact that I probably knew the decaying carcasses I loaded into the belly of the plane, even sharing a cigarette were those I met during the primary mission. To know those virginal faces were now deceased in the body bags, staring with glazed dead eyes at nothing, disturbs me to this day. I'm thankful I don't suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome, but the remembrance still chills my bones and upends the hair on the back of my neck. 10 months later, I returned to civilian life with crystal clarity of purpose and direction. I entered college and studied philosophy and the social sciences. As President Nixon's strategic withdrawal of U.S. troops hit full stride, I graduated with my Ph.D. and salutatory honors from an established Ivy League school and resettled in Waverly's Crossing. Although it was not the most prestigious place to begin my career, I accepted a professorship at local Western University in the philosophy department. I was a young man, rapidly approaching my 30s, so my options were few indeed. Therefore, I welcomed this employment. It took a matter of 5 years before I became head of the philosophy department at Western, and I'm proud to report my sterling record and excellent academic standards, which I instilled in both students and staff. I must add I'm a well-respected member of many philosophy think tanks and am held in high regard by my peers. In review of my scrawling to this point, I believe I've sufficiently established my credentials. I've also exhausted 2 more packs of cigarettes in the process. I now feel I may offer the incident which has pulled the proverbial carpet of reality from underneath my logically planted feet. I shall steady my pen and brace my nerves, for someone must know what transpired in that unholy church. Someone must realize what has been unleashed upon our fragile, spinning planet. Someone, perhaps you, brave reader, must stop this unchained horror before the hour grows too late. The events leading to last night's terror began 2 weeks ago, which seems like another lifetime now. I was teaching a remedial philosophy class with the topic Theories of Heaven and Hell, Social and Theological Aspects. From experience, I knew this was to be a heated debate due to the inherent volatility and extreme opinions generated by the subject matter. I allotted a full week to this discussion. The first day of general discussion, the next 2 days in the Judeo-Christian angle, a day for Eastern philosophy, and the final day delving into paganism and so-called Satanism. It was on the final day that Tim Narzik became vocal. Tim Narzik, more commonly known around the campus as the Death Dealer, or Double D to his friends, was the savior of Western University's football program. His 6'6", 290-pound frame of solid muscle single-handedly put Western in the coach's top 25 poll for 3 years running. Not only was the boy a destructive defensive linebacker, he was part of a rare breed that played offense as well. Third down running back, short yardage specialist. His face, seemingly created by an inspired Grecian sculptor, held piercing blue eyes. His golden hair, long and feathered, would have completed the image Hitler had sought for the master race. To be kind, what he had in the way of physical prowess and beauty did not balance his struggling academic record. Yet he walked the halls of the school as if he were its progenitor. Any words spoken from his full lips seemed prepared and delivered in the execution, and were normally delivered as a rebuttal. Faculty and peers alike respected Tim Narzik, but he had few friends. I can't recall the actual tangent we'd been debating at that moment. It didn't matter. Tim Narzik's voice severed the discussion and drew all eyes to him. The Prince is God, he stated cleanly. Excuse me, Mr. Narzik, I uttered, bewildered at the force of his words. The Prince is God, he stated. Prince? Yes. Would you care to elaborate? I was duly intrigued. Yes. At this point, all eyes were upon him. He spoke with a reflective confidence. I was 10 years old. I was diagnosed with a rare type of bone cancer. Doctors said I wouldn't make it to my 11th birthday. There was no cure, they said. Said I was terminal. I prayed to the Christ God. At this, he sneered. And it got worse. Really? I was intrigued with no words to back up my intellectual awards. Then I found a copy of the Necronomicon. Read it cover to cover, twice. Then I prayed to the prince. He heard me. He cured me. His words were like cold water in my face, brisk and stark in its content. "Oh, that's not true, man," said one student. "Think so?" Isaac's penetrating blue eyes fixed on the boy. I went from 100-pound klutz to this. "Maybe you just ate your Wheaties." Another tried to joke, but the humor fell flat. "It was the prince," he stated unfazed. Thankfully, the class bell sounded. The students filed out almost shell-shocked by the frank admission. My psyche sufficiently rattled, I began preparations for my next class, Philosophy of Modern War. I didn't notice Mr. Narzik approach the rostrum, so he startled me as he spoke once more. "Professor Kettridge, I noticed the way you listened to my story." "Yes?" My voice was shaky for no reason. "If you'd like to see for yourself, I offer you an invitation to my church. Maybe you could get an opinion without being prejudiced." His smile was most disarming. "Actually, my curiosity is piqued." "Good. My place of worship is on the corner of Delacroix and West Elm. Do you know where that is?" "I believe I do, Tim." My response was sluggish. "Thank you for the invitation." "Welcome." He let the door close behind him. A cool jetty of fear splashed my heart, yet my curious nature took precedent. Had I but known what awaited me there, I would have lobotomized my curiosity center that instant. As it stood, it still required 1 full week before I amassed the fortitude to sally forth. Visiting the unholy dwelling was either accomplished through sheer bravery or utter stupidity. Both terms fall to me as synonymous in hindsight. I must pause, reader, for now shall I unfold the events of last night. Here, then, is the most trying part of my narration, for my cigarette cash is critically low. The crushed filters spilled over the edge of my large ceramic ashtray, like a tidal wave to a crumbling dike. My throat is severely raw, yet it does distract from the throbbing of my temples. I'll persevere because time is of the essence. I feel the shroud of the Reaper looming over my shoulder, unwilling to barter. If only No. The past is now circumspect. The die is cast. The Black Night shall be revealed. The waxing crescent moon sliced luminously through the ebony sky, igniting pinpoint stars across the heavens. The fading satellite illumination cast silver fingers of moonglow across the landscape of Waverley's Crossing, creating an opaqueness and otherworldly tone to the buildings and countryside. After a laborious day of schooling, and very unwilling to retreat my divorce-decreed apartment, I set upon a nocturnal drive of my hometown. The persecuting headlights released passing buildings into periphery, transforming them to phantom towers, where the unspeakable escaped moonlight. The blurred surroundings released my conscious mind, allowing my subconscious to take the wheel. The haze of non-remembrance lifted as I found myself closing the car door. But I was not home. I can only assume my unthinking mind had brought me to the place I now stood, the corner of Delacroix and West Elm. My senses sharpened acutely, and all the oppressive flaccidness of university activity and the subsequent car venture disappeared from limb and mind as I surveyed the suburban environment I'd entered. Narzik had not been exact in his directions, for the only building resembling a church was the house adjacent to the dilapidated house which rested on the intersection. Excited and anxious, I broke through the property line, demarcated by 8-foot fir trees, to get my first glimpse of the Church of the Prince. Pristinely painted was the church, a pure white coating basking serenely in the calm crescent light. A peaceful aura, akin to the flower bed of power blue tulips and snow lilies along the foundation, encircled the church with the cool comfort of a down-filled blanket on a lightless winter day. Mower strokes held order across the length of the front lawn, with only the pristine sidewalk parting the well-kept sea of green. The steeple spire harmoniously ascended, while visions of Christ in ornate stained glass peered from each window. The montage showed him sermonizing, him trekking to the cavalry and the bloody crucifixion. And this perplexed me. Christ represented so boldly. Was this some twisted relishing of Christ's suffering for the prince's followers? Is this a public display meant toward blasphemy? I realized it was not, for in my zealous observation, I had missed the White-Yard placard on the curb. It simply read, "The First Church of Christ Jesus, Reverend Dallas Kellogg, Pastor." Acidic fear coiled in my spine and waited to strike me as I crossed back through the phalanx of fir trees. Mr. Narzik was indeed accurate with his directions. Within the weed-infested lot, a crudely constructed curb sign limped in proclamation. The Church of the Prince, welcome to all. Repenting for my original oversight, I turned a critical eye upon the church facade. I felt a curious sense of déjà vu as I realized the two structures were similar in architectural design. Gooseflesh arose, for it felt as if I was seeing an alternate version of the Christ Church as viewed through a twisted looking-glass. Whereas the Christ Church soothingly reflected the moonlight, the Prince Church engulfed the mercurial rays, birthing sinister shadows of malefic intent. The aura encompassing the Prince Church radiated unnatural silence as spidery, blackish-green fingers of vegetation clawed the crimson-brown foundation. The sweet flower aroma of the Christ Church became the fetid stench of wet earth and stinkweed in the yard of the Prince Church. An ailing spire impotently sagged from the top of the building as if repulsed from the sky. Stained glass was presented as knotty pine boards, haphazardly nailed across the windows, without a hint of light from within. My fire of curiosity sufficiently stoked, I erred towards caution, and worked my way to the rear of the structure with the hope of a less conspicuous entrance. I retrieved my penlight from my breast pocket of my jacket, and proceeded to scout. A rusted steel gate proved to be my only hindrance. Verdigrised and deteriorated, the gate's double-pronged latch refused admittance, insofar as to make me scale the useless portal. The blame of poor upkeep could not be completely affixed to the minions of the prince, for the fence was a shield to a vast graveyard that encompassed both backyards of the churches. My miniature penlight skimmed from headstone to tombstone, glistening upon newer stones, while briefly spotting the worn and less tended markers. It was then, under the mystic moonbeam, that my mind's eye envisioned the struggle between the churches. I imagined the spiritual warfare waged over the decaying and lost souls located in the soil. I could visualize both theological camps forever locked in a vicious circle of death and redemption, never retreating, never surrendering, never giving ground, never allowing a definitive victor. Registering this observation, I quickly set out to gain entry into the ominous Church of the Prince. Fumbling under the influx of adrenaline, my anxious hands made to open the dilapidated door of the service entrance. Flakes of rust fell precipitously to the overgrown patio as I carefully turned the knob. It was unlocked, to my amazement. Just as surprising, the door opened soundlessly, and no alarming creak or squeak was issued. I had truly envisioned the sound effects commonly associated with horror movies, yet the door swung inward without timber. I entered with the silver moon smiling evilly upon my back. My minuscule light confirmed my suspicions. This room was once a storage pantry. The 20-square-foot room neatly displayed rich, unornamented robes of blood red on the right. Countering on the left, an antique oak table supported various platters, candelabras, and chalices of brightly polished silver. Additionally, 2 boxes of tapered 12-inch black candles lay motionless next to the glittering ware. Beside the door leading outdoors, there was another door, undoubtedly providing access to the church's inner sanctum. Beyond the door, my ears piqued the low sound, almost guttural chanting. The chant was both enticing and repulsive, yet, since I detected no break in cadence, I assumed my unlawful entrance remained undetected. However, I was not going to open the door to prove my theory. Limited in options, my resolve began crumbling like sandcastles against the waxing tide. It was then my trusty penlight offered another alternative to the humming portal. Obscured behind the robes, a skeletal ladder of wrought iron scaled the wall, escaping into the inky darkness above the pantry ceiling. Before I accepted its invitation, my rational mind proffered a preventative measure to be taken. Stripping a malleable lump of ebony wax from its cordwick, I neatly weighted the keyhole and its interior with the black wax. As an extra precaution, I spent what seemed hours delicately turning the latch bolt, further clogging the door's ability to grant access. If I were to be discovered, I hoped this would provide me with critical seconds for an unmolested escape into the graveyard beyond. With unexpected hurdles in place, I clenched my penlight in my teeth and began ascending the stolid ladder. As I surmised, the ladder evacuated into a maintenance walkway that crossed around the interior of the church. Abandoned cobwebs, choking dust motes, and a cloying, musty odor were the only furnishings here. For no particular reason, I chose the right path, with only my small halogen beam leading the way. Cautiously traversing the cramped walkway, I discovered a baseball-sized hole in the ceiling. Undoubtedly, a light fixture once resided there, breaching the wallboard. A somber light from below filtered up through the hole, along with the faint aroma of spicy incense. I swallowed hard and proceeded to garner my first view of the congregational hall of the Church of the Prince. Approximately 150 feet in length and 75 feet in width were the temple's dimensions. Black paint inundated the walls and steeple ceiling, which made measurement difficult, if not impossible. Deep mahogany pews, upholstered in plush wine fabric, aligned 6 in each row, with 3 distinctive rows. 5-foot-tall, freestanding silver candelabras bookmarked each entrance to the pews. Each candelabra maintained a single black candle, flickering a dark light. 2 wine rugs divided the rows like pulsing arteries, leading to the dais. The altar itself stood 4 feet in height, measured 6 feet across, and was completely composed of bloodstone. Bloodstone is a jet black rock with tiny veins of cardinal red sediment running throughout. I'd never thought a geological wonder such as this could ever be termed as sinister. However, as it lay in a circle of power, or pentagram, which was carved on the floor where it was set, my opinion quickly changed. The finishing touch, had shining silver braziers just outside the circle at each star point, lazily churning out the heady incense I previously detected. The parishioners entered, 57 in all, and took places on the pews in their voluminous, gender-obscuring robes. The rumbling chant of the parishioners echoed through the chamber as a dark chorus of obscene strength. Of the crowd below, 3 made their way to the dais. These 3 were set apart from the rest due to the black sashes they wore. One of the 3 was further placed apart from the other 2, for the black sash worn was covered with malefic silver runes of a forgotten language. The obscured continued the unholy chorus from unseen mouths until the 3 were positioned correctly upon the platform. The atmosphere, although macabre and haunting, drew me into the ambiance of the thrumming chords. I felt lightheaded, almost mesmerized by the chant. It was only when the high priest held his hand aloft, silencing the siren's call, did I regain my senses and snap attentively. The awakening is at hand. The priest's baritone split the fresh silence. Let the vessel of our Lord approach. In the first pew of the center section, a single figure rose and strode confidently onto the platform. The figure kneeled briefly before the altar, then stood motionless before the onlookers. The 2, in simple black sashes, opened the vessel's robe, allowing it to deflate about the vessel's feet. Within the robe, a nude figure was revealed. His Olympian physique glistened in the low candlelight, and his penis was erect with the promise of things to come. Strands of feathered blonde hair sweatily framed his statuesque face. His piercing blue eyes surveyed the red-robed audience without emotion. A frigid fear engulfed me. Tim Narzik was the vessel of the prince. The high priest's hooded eyes twinkled animalistically, producing a wickedly curved dagger encrusted with stones. The priest presented the dagger to Narzik, who graciously accepted. Now begins the time of the prince. The priest boomed, inspiring the parishioners into chanting. I need not have looked at my watch to know it was midnight. The stifling apprehension in my heart confirmed the time. In a language ancient and foul, 3 priests began a recitation that could only be construed as a spelling. The phonics sounded like a bastardized version of Latin, yet far, far older and diabolical. My intuition begged me to leave at this point, yet I could not cease my voyeurism. I had to see. It is only now that I regret my damnable curiosity. Narzik grasped the dagger with both hands, pointing toward his defined chest. Instead of plunging the knife into his bosom, Narzik calmly sliced a bloody X, going diagonally from each nipple, deftly into his flesh. Droplets of gore carelessly dribbled down his chest, spattering his feet and cold platform below, as he began carving an inverted V. The point of the V began at his upper sternum, with the tips of the V joining the lower portion of the previously carved X. Another tributary opened as he connected his sliced nipples with a horizontal gash. Narzik's final act of self-mutilation had the gore-soaked blade encircling his newly created 5-pointed star, completing the bloody pentagram forged in blood and pain. The dagger fell from his hand, clattering noisily to the floor. Immediately, the priests were beside him, leading him to the bloodstone altar. The trio laid Narzik upon the altar and vacated the pentagram on the floor, never breaking their aberrant cadence. I cannot confirm the final, breathless words of Tim Narzik as he lay bleeding to death on that cold slab of ghastly stone. Yet I would testify he mouthed, "Thy will be done, O mighty prince." It was then the Fantastics implanted reality. The 5 braziers erupted, spewing sickly colored clouds. The smoke never left the circle of power on the floor, spewing to twist and turn within its confines. Each brazier vomited individual colors of fuchsia, sepia, canary, cyan, and chartreuse, neither color supplanting nor mingling with the other. The smog began dancing above Narzik in a vulgar choreography of spasmodic threads. The spicy aroma of incense had also retreated, leaving the foul, corrosive air of things ancient, dead, and decaying. It was then my unbelieving eyes caught the face of death dealer Narzik. The confident, arrogant smile of Narzik had melted away, leaving a face of paralyzed distress to defend. My jaw literally fell slack as I noticed the splotches of crimson on the dagger and platform begin coagulating. The blood defied gravity, cascading into the base of the hovering cloud. My constitution lurched as the midst of blasphemous colors glowed as if vitalized or brought to life by the absorbed blood. If it were alive, the blood it had taken surely did not satisfy its craving. Rivulets of blood floated away from Nazric's body, a crimson sprinkle of rain. The crude pentagram etched on his chest suddenly burst like an overtaxed dam of flesh. More accurately, the blood gushed upward as if it were a faucet abruptly thrust full open. The merciless waterfall of crimson life ascended brutally, draining its victim barren. This fact did not escape Nazric's attention. I could never, even if I were given 2 lifetimes, describe Nazric's face, twisted in a desperate, futile plea of terror and despair. I believe watching your very life's blood being slowly consumed to be in a realm that eclipses any subconscious nightmare anyone could ever dream. Nazric's back arched shockingly, attempting to rid himself of the obvious agony coursing through his frame. His massive hands clenched and unclenched in futility as the endless flow of crimson continued. I watched like a disembodied spirit as his tan body blanched under the assault of the beastly, colorful cloud. Somewhere in my mind, a small prayer was said for the poor boy to end the suffering. What seemed like decades of torture, the macabre siphoning lasted a scant minute or 2. Narzik's hollow eyes fixed upon the final red droplet. It bobbed in midair, bidding a final adieu, then joined its kindred in the foul thing above. Narzik's body relaxed from the assault, and he exhaled a ragged breath of relief. A sudden recognition dawned upon his pale face. It was more than a spasmodic exhalation his lungs performed. It was the expiration of life itself. Tim Narzik offered a final expression of unbelieving betrayal as he heard his own death rattle and collapsed. Willing to embrace the concept of utter madness to retain the final threads of sanity I tenuously held, I found myself unable to detach myself from the continuing saga. I watched the high priest break cadence. In the tongue of an ancient bastard language, he began chanting directly at the throbbing cloud. The words spewed from his vile lips affected the cloud. It swayed like a cobra to the seductive flute. Oh, dear reader, I can never relate the sheer, horrific numbness as I watched spindly fingers emerge from the thing and descend. The colorful tendrils lovingly caressed the flesh pentagram on Narzik's still chest, then proceeded to seep into the carved cracks. The malefic fog pulsed vibrantly as its mass dwindled into the pentagram, flowing like smoke under a shut door. Once the final wisp of foul cloud invaded the corpse, the pentagram briefly held a phosphorescent hue and vanished. It was not my imagination that I observed the pale pallor revert to its golden tan, nor did I dream the sliced flesh begin to mend with deliberation. Neither did I imagine the carved flesh disappear, leaving a clean, rugged chest. However, I pray that I dreamt the sight of Narzik's dead corpse sitting upright, issuing slight wisps of colorful vapor from the mouth. The thing that was not Narzik, disoriented in its new form, glared about the church in bitter unremembrance. The corpse swung its feet haphazardly over the altar and to the floor, babbling cryptic thoughts to itself. It walked with toddler steps, then matured its gait. With the improvement of the physical, its speech seemed to progress. Germanic to Pict, to Saxon, to English. The thing observed his silent congregation as the three priests swathed his new body in an indigo robe covered with sharp, twisted runes. He raised his hands in the air and beamed horribly at the followers, causing them to fall to their collective knees in awe and homage. Then, in a voice of bottomless evil, 2 words fell from its lips like thunder as it smiled with all the venom in the world. Worship me. My fragile intellect became a pane of glass, with its words striking me like a brick. I shattered and quickly sought escape from this waking nightmare. I don't recall where I received the bruise discoloring my left cheek, nor can I explain the gash now clotting on my right forearm. The only incident I can relate is the cursing and abuse heaped upon the wax door by the followers of the prince as I made my way to freedom. I happily drew a breath of the outdoors and smiled at the release. Then I froze. Warm urine flowed serenely down my trouser leg, pooling in my loafer and puddling underfoot. Terror, brisk and uncontrollable, constricted my windpipe like a Perseus gazing into Medusa's scaly face. How I would have welcomed turning to stone. Instead, the deep blue eyes of a dead man pierced my soul with a razor-blade stare. In that instant, I knew the dead eyes of Tim Narzik were alive as the Prince of Darkness. Our gaze locked for an eternity. My mind purged itself of all memories, all wisdom, all dreams, all possible futures. I felt rigor mortis creep into my bones as the prince held the grin of a Cheshire cat on his stolen face. The moon over its shoulder looked like the reaper's sickle, ready to harvest. I resolved my fate right then and there. It looked at me with finality and laughed. I spared no second glance as I fled. Its hollow, humorless laugh reverberated in my eardrums. The mocking chuckle from the lips of a dead man can never be erased from my poor mind, no matter how I would pray to end. In reviewing these cramped pages of dissertation, I mournfully extinguished my final cigarette. I shall not journey out for more. I can no longer leave my little apartment. Why? When I returned from my last nicotine excursion, a large, innocuous brown papered package awaited me. There was neither card nor return address enclosed. Shall I relate the contents, which shake me to my very marrow? Inside the brown folds of paper, a pristine, olive-drab body bag with my name stenciled on the outside, reeking of newness and bodily decay. Although it would have substantiated my claims, I threw the abhorrent thing down the incinerator slot. Keeping the blasted thing would surely have destroyed any fragments of my psyche that remained. Should I have kept it? It doesn't matter now. Such observations are moot. I've gazed into the piercing blue eyes of the abyss and found myself condemned. You see, the Prince of Darkness walks the earth, and he calls my name.
Jonas was scrubbing dishes in the stainless steel basins at the back of Cafe Away when he heard what he thought was a whisper coming from the drainpipe. He knelt closer to the drainpipe's metal grate, covered in bits of food and grease, tucking his headphones, along with his shaggy brown hair, behind his ear. All he could hear were the grumblings of the restaurant's pipes, the workings of the city deeply vibrating the floor, the noise of pans hitting the stovetop, tongs, knives, but not the eerie whisper he had heard a moment before. With the light of his phone, he looked down through the silver grate into the darkness. He thought he saw a pair of yellow eyes, but then they were gone as fast as they had appeared. The miasmic odor of dish scuzz then pushed him away, but when Jonas stood up, the voice sounded again. Jonas. It hissed like a lazy snake. Who's there? Jonas looked back down the grate. I've come to help. The voice had no visible physicality from which it came. Jonas, the hell you doing? The chef, Jonas's father, slammed a hot pan into the dish pit, shattering many of the glasses and plates, steam whistling off the edges of the pan like a crashed spacecraft. The father wore an aged frown, creased, painful, but it seemed like more of a result of some unseen distress than a voluntary expression. Ice blue eyes, thinning fair hair. Sweat spotted his greasy white undershirt, swollen at the belly. His apron was awash in a buffet of food stains. I'm over here drowning at the stove, and here you are playing with dirt on the floor. You're 18. When are you going to start acting like it? He kicked Jonas in the seat of his pants. Jonas stood up in his father's face. Although he'd finished puberty and was now fully in early adulthood, with a scraggly goatee to prove it. He'd also smoked cigarettes, even gotten drunk a few times. However, his father was still taller than him, so he still acted like his father in the truest sense of the word. The father's stubbled chin loomed over the top of Jonas's head like some mountain the young man would someday have to climb. Jonas backed down. He knew that his father was upset. Lately, anything Jonas did, whether wandering around town at night or drawing futuristic robots, was met with disdain, a reaction, and violence. Jonas never retaliated since his mother was dying from an unknown sickness. It took everything in the young man's power to try and keep together the budding sense of the world he still had, so he took the verbal and physical abuse, bottled it up, and swallowed it. The father and son had tried every doctor in town. The same response came from each. They couldn't cure what they didn't know. In the meantime, the two men could do nothing but wait in anguish, like life itself had turned sinister for this particular family, as if the hand dealt were all off color, off suit, and out of order. Later that evening, the father was drinking in their dimly lit living room, blindly screaming lyrics to Iggy and the Stooges' Raw Power. Their downtown apartment sat above Cafe Away. Its tall windows overlooked the cobblestone streets below, busy with people of the night, selling fortunes, hot dogs from handcarts, the gawkers, the curious, the paranoid, the hopeful, all shuffling around. They were all searching, as if seeking greater meaning to behold in the secret corners of the night. Their once elegant Victorian sofa now sat swallowed in whiskey-stained bedsheets. The father had taken to sleeping on the couch ever since Marie grew sick, descending wholly into himself. Jonas sat on his windowsill smoking, Drawings of science fiction scenes covered his wall. Big-breasted robots, lasers, futuristic cityscapes. His headphones pulsed techno beats. He contemplated what he could do, not wanting to continue serving his father's dream of the restaurateur's life. The ever-present smell of food exhausted his emotions. Work in the cafe was endless. It felt like they were chained to the faded pink building, cracking rocks every day, but making no progress. There was never any time off, no holidays, no traveling, no college in a different state. Only that night's dinner service and the hope that business lasted to the next day. Every time Jonas sat in contemplation, he arrived at the same conclusion. He needed to stay to see how things played out with his mother, even if it meant helping his father, washing dishes, prepping food, or trapping and killing the rats that held domain over the underworld of the city. Quizzing himself over what to do next, Jonas noticed a flicker of dull light through the web of Spanish moss hanging on the massive oak outside his window. The yellow eyes were there for a brief moment, then disappeared, a spider crawling down the moss as if nothing were there. Jonas stopped his music.
"Why won't you let me help you?"
The voice hissed. It sounded strained. "I don't even know what you are." Jonas's eyes searched the courtyard. The orange glow of the gas lamp flames gave the heavy, humid air a suggestive feel. Tree shadows danced and grew in great lengths along the brick floor of the courtyard, or high along the stuccoed walls of the other buildings that formed the courtyard, painted in bright blues, purples, or reds. Despite the entire carnivalesque appearance of the atmosphere, where it seemed almost anything was possible, Jonas couldn't see the figure.
"I'm your servant, to do as you need. But first, I need you to bring me something."
"What?"
"A lock of your father's hair."
Jonas stared at his hands. At that moment, he couldn't understand why, but he considered contemplating the task the voice asked for. Perhaps the voice was inside his own head, manifested as a trauma response to his mother's declining health, his father's declining grip on sanity. Either way, the favor seemed simple enough to him. Jonas couldn't explain why, but it seemed normal to want to help the unknown being. The living room ruckus of his father echoed off the family pictures in the darkened hallway Jonas walked down. The thick blanket of sticky air was enough to take one's breath away, but when he sat on her bed next to her, Jonas felt cold. Her body looked defeated, as if a strong breeze were to come, she may lift off like a leaf from the ground, ready to land where the earth determined. She was no longer the woman who talked about places to visit with Jonas, or the woman who made fun of the father's temper, permanently relieving the tension for the trio. She was now just a vessel for the world's whims, an afterthought, collateral damage to the machinations the sun set into motion every second of every day. Jonas kissed her forehead, a shiver wiggling up his spine despite the dots of sweat lining his skin. In the living room, the father was looking through an album of pictures. The wail of his aggressive rock music combined with candlelight gave off an almost sinister impression. Jonas snuck behind him, opening a pair of scissors, but the father sang so drunkenly his head swayed back violently toward the scissors. Jonas pulled them back a second before they cut into his father's neck.
"Jonas? What the hell was that?"
He rubbed the back of his neck, looking back at Jonas with glazed eyes, but Jonas had already clipped the tuft of hair, tucked it into his pocket. The father then lit a cigarette, the sweet, acrid smell of tobacco lifting and stretching slowly in the thick air like a spell. "Let's go. I've got a project." The father led him into the kitchen. A scratched and scarred stockpot sat on the stove over low heat, steam puffing out from the sides of the lid. The heat from the stove mixed with the summer air was enough to blur Jonas's vision. The father pulled a turtle the size of a baseball glove from the sink, its legs slowly scrambling through the air, searching for ground. "All right, we need to clip the head quickly before it gets the chance to slip and hide. Don't you chicken out on me like you did last time." The father handed Jonas the black penknife, his initials crudely carved into the maple. The father took the turtle by its hind legs, looked his son in the eye for a long moment, then hung the turtle upside down. For a moment, the turtle's head extended down toward the ground. Jonas froze. He looked into the turtle's black eye. He imagined a small world captured within, one in which there was no killing, one in which Jonas was far away from here, free from these heavy burdens, a world where death played a less prominent role, a world wide open to time with no pressure on him to make decisions. Then he was snatched from the daydream by a hard smack to his jaw. He slid back to the floor, crashing into the cabinets, the father snatching the blade from his hand, slicing the turtle's throat, and hanging it over the sink all in one fluid motion. "I told you to be quick." "I'm sorry." His back turned. Puffs of smoke arose around the father like a cartoon bull. He set a hook into the turtle to keep it suspended over the sink while it bled out. The father ladled out a small cup of the broth, handing it to Jonas. They had been serving the mother soup every night since she took sick. It was more a ritual, an offering, to give the two men peace of mind. Jonas set the cup of steaming soup down next to his mother on her nightstand. He took small spoonfuls to wet her lips with the broth, but even this tiny amount of liquid slid down her cheek, pooling on the silk pillowcase. He left the meatless broth, then returned to his room, placing the hair on the windowsill where he heard the voice. A slight gust of wind came and whisked the hairs away. The following day, Jonas made it downstairs to the restaurant first. He flicked the fluorescent kitchen lights on, scaring the rats back to their corners. Out in the street, the day had already begun. Sunglassed shoppers pecked their way through the cafes and shops like meandering pigeons. Tonight would be busy, Jonas thought, gazing at the throng of people. Maybe the business would be enough to distract the father, Jonas hoped. Jonas looked in the coolers, both below the line and walk-in, to see what he needed for the night. A clipboard hung outside the cooler with a list his father made out. But for once, Jonas ignored this, opting instead to determine what he thought they would need for the night. His father had owned Cafe Away since before Jonas was born, and his father before that. They even had the faded black and white pictures of the men on the walls of the cramped cafe. The line to follow had been drawn long before the sperm ever hit the egg, but Jonas was born seeking his exit ramp. He no longer trusted his father's judgment. The father was soggy. His ability to lead, to make decisions, was diluted. Jonas was cutting okra when the father made his way creakily down the steps, grunting and moaning like an old ship. His eyes were puffy underneath, the lids lined in fire red, almost more painful to look at than it may have been for him to look out of. "Bacon and eggs, kiddo?" "Sure, Pop." Jonas tread carefully in the morning so as not to tip the scales too early. The father was a different person in the morning, but this never lasted long. The first sign of stress would drive him to the bottle, and if there wasn't any stress, that too may drive him to the bottle. The father set a pan on the stove. The sizzling bacon's tangy fat smelled strong enough to taste from the other side of the kitchen. While the food was cooked, the father squeezed lemons, shook the juice in bar tins, topped the mixture with soda water in 2 Collins glasses for fresh lemon sodas. The father grabbed the food and sodas, motioning for Jonas to follow him. They sat in the courtyard under the oak, hundreds of years old, witness to the passing of generations, even after the father was dead and gone, and Jonas too. The tree would still stand here, slowly sinking its roots deeper into the earth, into this exact place, remaining the same place it was birthed. Cardinals called out to one another in the treetops, accentuating the background din of the city's bustle beyond the walls of the courtyard the two sat in, dipping their toast in the thick yellow yolk. Remember when Mom took us to the Grand Canyon and the vulture snatched her turkey sandwich right out of her hand? The father laughed, choking on a piece of food. He quickly drained his lemon soda, followed with a deep breath. Man, I thought she was going to kill that poor bird, chase it to the bottom of the whole canyon if it didn't give up its sandwich. It's just, she wouldn't let a stupid bird like that push her around. I know she'll fight through this. The father set his arm around his son's shoulder. Jonas's eyes welled with tears. He tossed his leaf and seed pod covered bread out onto the bricks. Pigeons swooped down from the roofs to fight over the egg-soaked slice of bread as Jonas went back inside the kitchen. His father blankly stared out at the sky, as if the answers were somewhere out there, far and away. When the voice revisited Jonas, the restaurant was busier than usual. The father was overwhelmed, drinking, unable to handle the demand. "We've run out of okra! Jonas! Jonas!" Jonas rushed from the dish area to the line where his father was. Another cook was there helping with the night's rush. Flames spewed off the grill. Smoke, steam, and flecks of grease flew through the air. The tiny kitchen at the back of the cafe was a veritable hell on earth, only more brightly lit. "We've run out of okra. We've run out of batter. This is a mess. I can't do anything. I've got 1,000,000 orders for fried okra and not a single piece of chopped fucking okra!" The father growled. He was sweating, breathing heavily. "Well?" he snapped at Jonas. "Are you going to do something about it?" Jonas stood frozen. Part of him wanted to jump on his father, smash his face until he begged for mercy, keep bashing until his father was a real man who could handle the type of curveballs life tosses out. But this is the exact reason why he pitied his father, felt he was pathetic. Jonas was sorry. He was tired of feeling trapped. "I didn't realize it would be this busy, Pop." "You didn't realize a lot of things. Here, take this and fill it to the brim with okra. Overflowing with okra." Jonas looked at the metal container his father held with metal tongs. He shook his head.
"Take the pan and fill it up,"
his father hissed. That sound, his voice sounded just like the whispering voice he had heard. But that couldn't be. Jonas was worried and wondered if he was losing his mind. Then, Jonas was brought right back to reality by the scorching hot pan shoved in his hands by his father. Jonas screamed, dropping the pan. "You've dropped the pan on the floor, son. Pick it up." The father kicked the pan to the back of the kitchen, then turned his back. Squatting by the prep stove in the back, Jonas heard the voice again.
"I can help."
"Leave me alone, Jesus." Jonas peered under the stove, looked for a shape, a movement, a trace of physical presence. He remembered those yellow eyes, like a cat, but the pupils were gone, just yellow globes floating in the ether. When he shined his phone down, there was nothing.
Bring me a knuckle,
it hissed. Just shut the fuck up. I've got to cut this stupid okra.
Bring me a knuckle, and I'll make your problems go away.
Jonas ignored the voice, chopping the okra as fast as he could. He then rushed the pan back to his father, cooking on the line. There was a tub full of dishes below the stove he reached down to get. Jonas lifted his head with the tub. At the same time, the father turned around without looking, crashing into Jonas. Oh, Jesus, Jonas, look at what you've done! The food Jonas had just prepped spilled to the floor. You're going to cut okra all night. But you're the one who bumped into me. Would you get the fuck off my back? What did you say? Jonas bent down to pick up the food, and the father's chef knife had been knocked to the floor, along with the tongs and sauté pan. The blade glinted in the fluorescent kitchen light, just like the yellow eyes. Time seemed to slow down for Jonas at that moment. The voice sounded like it was coming from the blade now.
Pick it up, Jonas. Just a quick cut. Put the knife in your hand. It'll feel good. I promise it'll feel good in your hand. So light and easy. Oh, yes. Pick it up.
His father bent down to pick up the knife, the voice shouting at him, commanding him.
Pick it up now! Take a swipe at his pinky before he has a chance to hurt you!
Jonas stared at the fallen dishes, the knife, his father looking down at him with a frown of contempt. All of it so slow, almost frozen in time for Jonas to consider what he would do. In that brief moment, he felt he actually had control for the first time in his life. He hated his father, so quick to turn on him, cluelessly drinking his problems away, doing nothing to help his mother, blaming everything on Jonas. He could never escape his father's ridicule, his violence. Here's your knife. Don't hand it to me like that, you'll kill someone. Right.
Yes, do it. Swipe at his hand. Cut the whole thing off.
Jonas pretended to flip the handle around to hand it to his father the correct way, then made a quick, hard stab outside his hand. Motherfucker! What the fuck did you do? Blood spurted from the father's hand, a mess of it all over his undershirt and white cooking apron, covering Jonas's baggy jeans, the kitchen floor. Adrenaline surged through Jonas so hard his knees felt weak. It felt incredible. He bent down, scanning the floor for any sign of flesh, spotting the bloody tip of the father's pinky finger right beside one of the legs of the stove. He snuck it into his pocket, then stood back up. We gotta get you to a hospital. And who's going to cook all the food, you bloody idiot? The father had wrapped his apron around his bleeding finger. I'll take care of it, and you can drive yourself to the hospital. Oh God, no you can't! You'll sink the whole business! Tell everyone that they've gotta leave. You have to drive. Jonas cleared out all the guests in the cafe, then drove the father to the hospital. The two men were covered in the father's blood. Once the father had come back home, Jonas helped him down to the couch. They had given him drugs for the pain. The father passed out on his pitiful couch bedspread, bottle in hand. Jonas went back to his room, leaving the tip of the pinky out on his windowsill. A breeze swooped it away. Then the voice hissed,
Perfect. I only need one more.
"What the hell? What do you want me to do? Cut my father's head off? I just want this to all end." Jonas smashed his standing lamp down to the hardwood floor, shattering the light bulb. He tore his posters from off the wall, ripping them to shreds, then punched a hole right through the drywall of his bedroom, which slowed him down. 2 rivulets of tears streamed down his cheeks. "I just want all this to end," Jonas whimpered.
I only need a tooth. Just one tooth, and I can make this all go away.
The voice tried to reason. It now sounded identical to his father. Jonas couldn't understand if this were happening or all inside his head. He didn't know how he would get a tooth from his father's head. He wasn't sure it was something he wanted to do. He didn't know what to do, so he walked into his mother's room. Her body was so small against the large panel headboard. His parents' bedroom used to be a place of mystery. It was a place where they could be together, a unit separate from Jonas, defined by their relationship to one another. As he stood in the doorway now, his mother's perfumes lined up in front of her large oval vanity seemed so small and meaningless. He was overwhelmed in sadness. The room felt like a chamber of death. The whole house felt dark and sinister, like it had pinned Jonas down, strangling the life from him. He could hear his mother wheezing from where he stood, her body writhing from the struggle of each breath. Jonas didn't want to walk in and sit by her, afraid of what he may realize. He blew her a kiss, then walked away. He crept downstairs to close up the restaurant since the two had only locked the door when they rushed the father to the hospital. Seated at the bar was one of the waitresses, Lexi. She was young, only a few years older than Jonas, her blue eyes vibrant. She wore a black dress, a cigarette between her 2 fingers, and a drink in her hand. "Hey, sorry about all that." Jonas couldn't look her in the eye when he spoke. He shuffled around, turning off light switches.
It's okay. I figured I would fix a drink and wait to see if everything turned out okay.
Why?
In case you wanted someone to talk to.
Jonas was nervous. He never knew what to say when around her, like someone had stolen his tongue. Every word that came to mind sounded dumb, not cool, not sexy. Her red lips, her red hair. Jonas burned with desire but didn't know what to do, not now. He heard voices. His mother was near death, and his father was drowning himself.
You know, I've seen the way he treats you. He might have had it coming.
She smirked, then tilted the glass back. It was an accident.
I know you got a lot of trouble, but I wanted to tell you, I've been there too. Don't let circumstances bring you down. Find your own way. Shit, I left my parents' house at 16. I haven't stayed in one place for more than a few months ever since. I'm not sure where I'm going, only that I'll keep trying.
Lexi stood up, bergamot and orange blossom mixed with the sweet toxicity of cigarette smell, intoxicating Jonas. She stepped closer, then reached her red-painted nails out, tousling the bangs on top of Jonas's head, hugging him.
Take a chance.
With that, she walked away. Jonas didn't know what it meant, but he felt a rush of adrenaline like he had shortly before. It was that feeling of power, autonomy, like life were worth living in that moment. He wanted to unravel the mystery of Lexi, of what she said, but she was out the door before he could think of anything clever to say. Another person that life swallowed. Jonas sat down at the bar. He looked over the cafe with its antique mirrors, small tables with crosshatched chairs, hanging photos, and rats secreting their way through the shadows. He had spent his entire life inside this space. Behind the bar, he noticed the pair of sunglasses. He walked behind the bar as he held them in his hand. They were his mother's. She had left them here every day before opening the restaurant. He and the father hadn't touched them since. Right beside the sunglasses, in a cup with pens, screwdrivers, wine openers, were a pair of pliers. He knew what he would do. The reason came from within him, a force he had no control over, but then came the feeling as if he had total control. He was fully convinced. He took the pliers into his pocket, then closed the front door to the restaurant. He checked all the burners on the stoves and turned the lights out before slowly stalking up the stairs. His father lay passed out on the couch, his hand bandaged, still in the bloody kitchen clothes he wore from that night's service. Jonas took the pliers from his pocket, the scent of Lexi on his brain. The voice was coming back to him, laughing as it spoke.
Yes, free yourself. Here is your chance.
He poured some of his father's whiskey onto the metal pliers, then softly pushed back one of his cheeks.
Attaboy, take that tooth as he took from you. Free me, so I can free you.
Jonas then placed the pliers around one of the incisors and tightened his grip on the pliers handle. He wiped the sweat from his brow, put his right foot onto his father's blood-splattered chest, then yanked with both hands. He was met with resistance, like pulling a rusty nail from a piece of concrete. His father woke up from the shock of pain, screaming. He kicked Jonas hard in the chest, but Jonas's hands were still on the pliers. The force of the hit blew Jonas back, causing the tooth to burst free in a fountain of blood. Then Jonas was on his back, and the tooth clattered to the corner of the room. His father rushed him, coming down on Jonas with a flurry of drunken blows. Left, then right fists punched into the boy's jaw, blood spurting from his face. The father's bandaged hand dripping with blood, the wound reopened. He then felt his father's fingers reach around his neck, using both hands to strangle the breath from him.
What the fuck is wrong with you, boy? Were you trying to kill me?
Blood poured down the father's chin onto Jonas's face while he strangled him. Hands and neck both red with blood. Jonas's eyes soaked in blood, his vision darkening from suffocation. Then, the hissing came back. It sounded louder, this time less like it was trapped amid the hot air, like it was right behind them. Then there were horrible sounds of bones crunching, cracking loud, like bricks smacking together. There were squelches of flesh stretching, the awful gurgle of organs stitching together. Then, a dreadful screech like a dying vacuum sucking up one last breath. It finally died down to just the hissing, only it was growing closer. Deep, thudding footsteps approached them. From the corner of his eye, Jonas saw a mirror version of his father towering above them. The real father noticed the shadow looming over him. His grip loosened around his son's neck as he stumbled backward in shock.
What the hell are you? Me?
He looked down at his hands, painted in blood. He patted his chest and arms, then pinched himself in disbelief. Jonas took the opportunity to scramble. He ran to his room, throwing clothes from a pile in the corner into a backpack, then down the hall. He passed his mother's room, but then turned back, knowing it was too late. The room was cold and dark. His mother's body was as still as a tree. An agonizing scream sounded out from the living room. Jonas hitched his backpack further onto his shoulder, placed the sunglasses on, and left the house.
In the world of international stolen art, an individual known only as Henri was considered the world's most successful thief. However, friends, neighbors, and business associates knew him as Marcel LeBlanc, a polite, proper, and jovial man in his late 40s who owned a seemingly successful import and export company. This establishment and its location in the sovereign state of Monaco allowed him to mingle with many of the world's richest individuals. Little did they know, his affluence did not come from his import-export company. Proceeds from this particular endeavor barely paid the electric bill for his Mediterranean coastal estate. His real wealth came from the acquisition of rare paintings. Once these paintings were stolen from public galleries or the best museums, they disappeared into the private collection of the mega-rich or somewhere else. To evade detection of his clandestine vocation by authorities, he worked through a broker. This individual communicated the wants and wishes of clients who coveted certain paintings or articles of historic importance. The man knew Marcel LeBlanc only as Henri. Face-to-face meetings were forbidden. Communications were normally instigated by his broker with an ad in France's national newspaper Le Monde. LeBlanc read it every day at a seaside cafe with his morning coffee and croissant. An ad of interest to LeBlanc would feature a particular winery in the Bordeaux region. Whenever the ad included a rare vintage from Chateau Latour calling for patrons to secure a bottle while supplies lasted, he knew to call a specific number from an untraceable mobile phone. Once he identified himself with a series of numbers, the broker would come on and tell him the latest requests from the rich collectors. On a late May morning, LeBlanc saw the ad and made the call. The electronic voice prompted, "Enter your security code." After punching in his 8-digit number, he heard, "Bonjour, Monsieur Henri." "Good morning, Arthur. I saw the ad." LeBlanc spoke with a nondescript accent. He felt this created an air of mystery to his country of origin. "Excellent. Are you in a position to do a little international travel?" "It depends. Where?" "United States." "Possibly. Where exactly in the States?" "New Orleans, the French Quarter." "Ah, I have not had the pleasure of visiting there for a long time. I look forward to it." "Good, the money being offered is double your normal fee." LeBlanc unconsciously moistened his lips. "I am impressed, Arthur." "The item my client is interested in is hanging in a privately owned hotel on Toulouse Street." "Even better." "There is a bonus if the owner is unaware the painting is missing for a while." "Oh? Are you still interested?" "Of course. Give me the details." 1 week later. "Good afternoon, sir. May I help you?" LeBlanc smiled as he offered his Platinum American Express card. "Yes, reservation for Black, Marcus Black." "Certainly, sir. Welcome to the Bristol Hotel. I see you are scheduled for 4 nights. Is that correct?" "Yes, I might need to stay 6. Will that be a problem?" "Of course not." The attractive, professionally dressed woman offered him her best smile as she typed on her computer keyboard. "Not a problem, Mr. Black. I have you staying until the 12th. How many key cards do you need?" "Just one." "Just one?" she asked with a gleam in her eye and a raised eyebrow. "Alas, it is just me." "Is this your first time in New Orleans?" "Yes," he lied. "I'm a writer and here doing research for my next book." "I see. If you need directions to any particular location, please don't hesitate to ask me." "That's very kind of you." She handed back his American Express card and a small envelope containing his plastic key card. "Can I assist you with anything else?" LeBlanc glanced at her left hand and noticed the lack of a ring. "At the moment, I can't think of anything." With a slight nod, she said, "Have a nice stay with us. Please do not hesitate to ask me any questions." He started to turn but hesitated. One more thing. Yes, Mr. Black. I understand the hotel has a painting hanging somewhere by the artist Mary Cassatt. Yes, we're quite proud of it. Can you tell me where it is? I can do better. Meet me here in the lobby at 6, and I will personally show it to you. At exactly 6 p.m., the attractive female introduced herself as Ariana Gold, the concierge. LeBlanc said, "It is very nice to meet you, Miss Gold. Please call me Ariana." "Only if you call me Mark." "It's a deal. Now, let me show you our magnificent art gallery." "An art gallery? Even better." He walked beside her as she pointed toward a set of double doors. "The gallery is only open for certain guests." "Should I be honored you are providing me with a tour?" She laughed. "Yes, it is my pleasure." "I will have to determine a way to repay you for the kindness." "Dinner would be nice." LeBlanc raised an eyebrow. "Indeed, I had no plans. Where would you like to go?" "Let's take the tour first, then we can decide." She opened the double doors with a passkey. As he entered, he passed through a cold pocket of air. He looked at her with a frown as she closed and locked the entrance behind him. "We keep the temperature low and the door locked." "I see." LeBlanc surveyed the small gallery and immediately recognized numerous high-dollar paintings. His eyes fell immediately on one by Paul Cézanne and another by Claude Monet. "Impressive. Is the Cézanne an original?" "You know your art. All of our pieces are originals. Some are lithographs, but we also have original oils with verified provenances." LeBlanc turned to his guide. "Amazing. I'm curious as to why they are in a hotel." "Very simple, Mark. This is the personal collection of the hotel's owner." "Ah." He paused for a moment. "Let's see what he's collected." The scope of the gallery impressed LeBlanc, and he saw numerous paintings worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. When they neared the back of the gallery, he saw the painting he sought. It was an impressionistic piece by Mary Cassatt. He stopped for a few moments to admire it. Ariana stood next to him and said, "Are you a fan of Ms. Cassatt?" "I'm familiar with most of her work, but I don't recognize this piece." "That's because it's the portrait of a man who had an affair with Ms. Cassatt during the summer of 1875 while she studied in Paris. She painted his portrait just before he returned to the United States." Bending over to study the brushstrokes closer, LeBlanc asked, "And who might her lover have been?" "That is confidential." Smiling, LeBlanc straightened and moved over to a painting next to the Cassatt. He stared at it for a very long time without saying a word. Ariana stood quietly behind him without interrupting his concentration. Finally, he turned to her. "This is a fascinating piece. Who painted it?" "The artist is unknown, although it has been in our inventory for as long as the gallery has been open. I agree with you. One can feel the allure of the scene and get lost in its background." LeBlanc folded his arms. "Is it for sale?" "No, none of these pieces are. The owner is very protective of them." "Please tell the owner I am impressed with his collection. He should be proud of it." Ariana only smiled. Over the course of the next few days, LeBlanc occupied his time trying to discover the identity of the elusive hotel owner. He also made a habit of having dinner with the lovely Miss Gold on a nightly basis. After spending numerous days attempting to find the elusive fellow, he came to the conclusion the man might be dead. During this time, LeBlanc began to determine how he could remove the Cassatt painting from the gallery without raising too much attention. On the 5th evening of his stay, an unexpected invitation from Ariana Gold solidified his plan. "Are you sure you have to leave the day after tomorrow, Mark?" "I'm a writer, Ariana. I can work from anywhere." "Is that a no? You don't have to leave just yet?" "That's exactly what it is, but I will need to extend my stay at the hotel." The woman smiled and sipped her wine. "You've treated me to dinner the last 4 nights. The least I could do is offer you a place to stay while you finish your research." Raising an eyebrow, he too sipped his wine. And where would that be? I have an extra room in my apartment. You could stay there until you complete your work. LeBlanc realized this would give him easy access to her gallery key and an unexpected way to acquire the cassette. He raised his glass and clinked it against hers. I accept your gracious hospitality. A week later. The warmth and passion of Ms. Gold's bed was hard to leave, but LeBlanc realized he knew enough about access to the gallery to acquire the needed painting and leave the room without being seen by any of the hotel personnel. On his last night in New Orleans, he prepared a meal for Ariana and himself. Mark, I did not realize you were a gourmet chef. Ariana raised her wine glass as she complimented LeBlanc. When you live by yourself, you either learn to cook or you go hungry. You have never told me where you live. A half smile graced the art thief's lips. I'm something of a gypsy, actually, but I do have a cabin in the Smoky Mountains I use as my own base. I imagine it is beautiful. It is. She began to unbutton her blouse. You'll have to take me there someday. He watched her as he took another sip of wine. Yes, someday. She stood and turned her back to him. The blouse fell to the floor as she walked toward the bedroom. I do hope you are behind me. After draining his glass, he stood and followed. An hour later, as they lay in each other's arms, she said, You've been very quiet tonight. Is something wrong? Just thinking. About? The painting next to the cassette. I can't get it out of my mind. I think about it a lot myself. 5 minutes later, he heard her breathing slow. Carefully and quietly, he pushed the covers back and went to the room where he kept his things. He retrieved an aerosol container of nitrous oxide from his duffel bag and a syringe with a small vial containing a clear liquid. He returned to Ariana's bedroom and placed a washcloth over his mouth and nose. He released the gas and waited. After a few minutes, he pinched her arm. No reaction. Filling the syringe with the clear liquid, he found the carotid artery on her neck and slipped the needle in. He then pushed the plunger until it stopped. After waiting a few minutes, he asked, Ariana, tell me how to gain access to the gallery. The information gleaned from the drugged woman revealed the existence of a passageway into the gallery behind a door labeled Maintenance. The physical key, found in her purse, opened a door located in a dark alley on the north side of the hotel. In addition, he learned of a panel where the security system could be disabled. She revealed the code during the last question he asked her. Then before leaving her apartment, he kissed her forehead and checked for a pulse. She maintained a strong heartbeat. Once satisfied she was okay, he let himself out. The key in the security code worked without incident. Once again, as he entered the gallery, he felt a cold pocket of air surround him. Brushing the feeling to the side, he moved silently to the partition where the cassette hung. He held a small, powerful flashlight in his teeth as he removed the painting from its frame. He then returned the empty frame to the wall. As he slipped the canvas into a large cloth satchel, he pointed the flashlight at the painting he had admired next to it. He shrugged, removed it from the wall, and placed it next to the cassette in the satchel. Before exiting the gallery, he liberated both the Cezanne and the Monet from their place of honor in the room. Back in the alley, he retrieved a bucket of gasoline and placed it next to a wall where he found the cassette. A long strip of cloth hung over the side. He lit this with a match and hurried out the exit. 24 hours later, he boarded a charter jet at the Matamoros International Airport in Mexico. Monaco, 2 days later. The process for LeBlanc to contact his broker required him to send a text message to a specific number. The message contained only one symbol and numerals, a question mark, and the phone number for his burner phone. 20 minutes later, the cell phone rang. Bonjour. Do you have it? Yes. Describe. LeBlanc held the phone to his ear with his shoulder as he held the painting. 88 by 52 centimeters, oil on canvas. Impressionist, 1875. Cassette. Excellent. Were there any complications? None. The fact the painting is missing will be hard to determine. Excellent. Your fee and bonus will be transferred today. Please send the article by our standard protocol. Without another word, LeBlanc ended the call, removed the battery, and crushed the small phone with his heel. He then returned his attention to the painting. I'm not sure why anyone would pay 2 million euros for this. 2 days later, after returning from a trip to Nice, where he visited a storage unit and shipped the cassette to a DHL location in Paris, LeBlanc sipped coffee on his sea-facing veranda. A warm breeze blew in from the southeast as he studied the unsigned painting liberated from the New Orleans hotel gallery. Where shall I hang you? He mused as he raised the coffee cup to his lips. The picture portrayed a winter nightscape of a dark forest trail winding off into the distance at the top left. A stream meandered in the right lower corner. The artist's brushstrokes made the water appear to flow toward the corner. A full moon appeared halfway up from the horizon, shining through bare limbs of trees. The light reflected off numerous patches of snow scattered on the woodland floor and stream. The effect of the picture on a viewer created an eerie and foreboding sensation. LeBlanc found it mesmerizing. He studied the painting, attempting to determine if the brushstrokes were by anyone he had encountered before. Whoever the artist, they were a master at lighting and composition. At the upper left corner in the middle of the trail, a 3mm vertical dark line could be seen. He did not remember seeing it on any of his earlier examinations. LeBlanc laid the picture down and went inside his house to retrieve a magnifying glass. When he returned to the veranda and the painting, the dark line could no longer be seen. 6 months later. After the successful execution of 2 more acquisition trips, Marcel LeBlanc decided to take a break from his larcenous lifestyle and concentrate on his import-export business. However, his habit of reading Le Monde every morning remained. On this particular delightful morning, a light breeze blew in from the southwest, warming the terrace where he sat. His eye caught the image of an ad for the winery. It announced an urgent warning for patrons of Chateau Latour. He went inside his residence, grabbed an unused burner phone, and dialed the number of his broker. After passing the security protocols, he heard the familiar voice say, "We may have a problem, Monsieur Henri." "Oh, what might that be?" "The Mary Cassatt you acquired some months back was not the correct painting. The one you provided was supposedly destroyed a long time ago." "I don't see how this should concern me." "The client wants their money back." LeBlanc laughed. "No refunds. Arthur, you know that." "Yes, I explained it to them more than once." "So what's the problem?" "They think it is a forgery and are threatening to expose our endeavors." LeBlanc remained quiet for a few moments as he considered his response. "Arthur, if you have maintained your security protocols, there is no way they can expose our activities." "It is not our network they are threatening. They plan to contact the hotel where the painting was acquired. Doing so could lead Interpol to the discovery of who stole it." "Doubtful." "Can you take that chance?" Once again, the conversation paused for a few moments. "Did you remind them they were the ones who gave us the article's location?" "Yes, several times." "They could be implicated as well." "I mentioned that." "Very well, Arthur." He paused. "Remind them this operation is a two-way street. If they attempt to expose me, I will burn them down." "Understood." The call ended and LeBlanc pursed his lips as he focused on the horizon of the southeast Mediterranean. The first call LeBlanc made went to the hotel owned by the family of Ariana Gold. "Bristol Hotel, how may we serve you?" "I would like to speak to Ariana Gold." "Beg your pardon? Who did you ask for?" "Ariana Gold." "I'm sorry, sir. No one by that name works here." LeBlanc raised an eyebrow. "She was the concierge when I stayed there 6 months ago. She was most helpful." "Once again, I am sorry, sir. I have worked here for 10 years and there has never been anyone by that name." "I see. Sorry, my mistake." LeBlanc ended the call without another word. He stood and returned to the interior of his residence to dismantle the burner phone. When he passed the painting, Taken on a whim during his last night in New Orleans, his eye caught something different in the upper left-hand corner. The vertical line had returned, only this time it was twice the length of the original marking and further down the trail. He stopped and leaned closer to where the painting hung. With a frown, he immediately went to his office and returned to the painting, this time with a magnifying glass. As he examined the mark, he could see a small stick figure, 2 rudimentary arms and legs each. With a start, he backed away from the picture and straightened. What the hell? Regaining his composure, he leaned closer to the canvas. This time he could see a round appendage at the top of the vertical line. Grasping the picture, he removed it from the wall and hurried to his workshop where he kept instruments designed to closely examine paintings. Using a large magnifying tool with a bright light surrounding the lens, he placed the painting underneath it and switched on the light. The miniature stick figure was gone. LeBlanc sat in front of his laptop and used Google to search for an Ariana Gold in New Orleans. The results of his searches found 3 individuals by that name. One would celebrate her 79th birthday in 2 days. The next was an aspiring track star for a local high school, and the third individual with the name was found in an obituary from the late 1940s. His next search centered on a law firm in Dallas. The 10th largest legal organization in the city advertised the services of Arthur Gold. Using another of his collection of burner phones, he called the law firm. "Thank you for calling the offices of Abrams, Ledger & Gold. How can I help you?" "May I speak to Arthur Gold?" "Mr. Gold is in court this morning. May I ask who's calling?" "Yes, Marcus Black." "What is the nature of your inquiry for Mr. Gold?" "It is a personal matter. When do you expect him back?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss Mr. Gold's itinerary. Would you like to leave a number so he can call you back?" "Just tell him I called. He'll know the name." LeBlanc pressed the end icon on his cell phone and then drummed his fingers on the desk. The time in Texas would be 7 hours behind him in Monaco. LeBlanc decided he would call again around 9 p.m. "Thank you for calling the offices of Abrams, Ledger & Gold. How may I help you?" "Arthur Gold, please." "May I say who's calling?" "Marcus Black. I called earlier today." "Please hold." LeBlanc listened to a guitar instrumental of a song he did not recognize for over a minute. Then a new female voice asked, "Arthur Gold's office. This is Mary. Can I help you?" "Yes, I am trying to contact Mr. Gold. Is he available?" "May I ask what this is in reference to?" "Yes, I'm trying to locate his daughter." The silence on the phone lasted for what seemed like an eternity. He checked to make sure the call was still connected. It was. The art thief stood and walked over to the painting and stared at it while he waited. What he saw made him end the call and stare at the painting. In very clear detail, halfway down the painted trail, a figure could be seen. With its back to the moon, LeBlanc saw a shadow cast onto the trail by the figure, just like an artist would create. While no details were clear, he could distinguish arms, legs, and a head on the figure. Knowing what had happened the last time he took his eyes off the painting, he removed it from the wall and retraced his steps to his desk. Without looking, he rummaged around in the top drawer until he put his hand on the magnifying glass. Placing it over the figure, he let out a gasp. The face on the shadowy figure, while somewhat grainy, was that of Ariana Gold. The next day, the sun barely peeked over the horizon of the Mediterranean as Marcel LeBlanc realized he had stayed on his veranda all night. Sleep seemed to be a companion to avoid as it brought on images he did not care to see or experience. The figure on the mysterious painting faded before his very eyes the night before. What the image appearing and disappearing meant, he could only guess. None of his speculations were comforting. Standing, he entered the house and brought the painting back to the veranda with the intent of heaving it over the railing into the turbulent waters below. He walked to the edge and looked down. Waves crashed against the rocky bluff 35 meters below his veranda. He rarely heard the constant sound anymore due to the continuous nature of waves pounding the shore. He hesitated before throwing the painting into the surf, his eyes taking a last glance at it. The figure materialized, but larger than the day before. This time, he could clearly see the features of Ariana's beautiful face as she stared at him from the trail. Her eyes seemed to pierce his soul. "Damn!" he yelled, dropping the painting onto the terracotta tiles. The damage caused by the fall separated the picture from the frame and splintered the joints holding the wooden pieces together. Taking several deep breaths, he picked up the canvas. The figure did not fade as usual, but remained, her eyes burning into him. LeBlanc turned and hurried back inside the seaside mansion. He placed the canvas in a storage area and turned off the light. As morning faded, winds blew in from the southeast, and a rare tropical cyclone event known as a metacane hit the area with gale force winds of 40 kilometers per hour. Wind and rain pounded on the glass windows facing the sea until late in the afternoon. When the sun peeked out from the rapidly retreating clouds, he returned to his office and powered up a burner cell phone. He sent a text message to a specific number with the customary symbol and numerals. The phone rang 5 minutes later. He answered. "Arthur, it's Henri." "Ah, monsieur, I am most glad you made contact. Are you ready to get back into the game?" "Not yet. I need you to have someone check out the hotel where I acquired the article. Something is not quite right." "May I ask what?" "There were too many high-dollar objects in the gallery, and when I think back on the experience, acquiring the article was way too easy." The broker paused for a moment. "Give me a few days." "I appreciate it." After the phone call, LeBlanc returned to the veranda and proceeded to pick up leaves, twigs, and multiple pieces of trash and paper littering the veranda. He spent an hour straightening outdoor furniture and removing debris, trying to go about his business without another thought to the mysterious painting. 4 days later, digging into his inventory of one-use phones, he sent a text message to his agent. The phone rang 2 minutes later. "Bonjour." "Monsieur Henri, I have news about the hotel. It is owned by a conglomerate in Dallas. There is no mention of a gallery associated with the property." "You sent me there, and I acquired the cassette." "Yes, most strange. That is what is so puzzling." LeBlanc remained quiet for a while. "Is anyone named Gold associated with this corporation?" "Yes, there are two. Arthur Gold, Sr., and his son Arthur Gold, Jr. Both are listed as corporate attorneys. There is also an Amanda Goldstein listed." "No mention of an Ariana Gold?" "No." "Very well. Can you provide me the address of the law firm?" After Arthur gave it to him, he said, "I have a job waiting if you are interested." After a momentary hesitation, LeBlanc said, "What and where?" 2 weeks later, Barcelona, Spain. A string quartet played compositions by Mozart, Beethoven, and Haydn in the background as Marcel LeBlanc mingled with the Spanish A-list celebrities and high-income elites. The gathering, in a recently renovated residence within the Gothic quarter of Barcelona, celebrated the acquisition by its owner of a highly sought-after set of prints by Pablo Picasso. With wine glass in hand, LeBlanc studied the 14 prints proudly displayed for the attendees on a newly installed standalone wall in the center of her large living area. From what he could determine without a detailed examination, they appeared genuine. These 14 prints were his target. The owner, an heiress to an international olive oil company and one of his larger clients for his export company, stood next to him. She said, "I am so glad you could attend our reveal party, Marcel." "I would not have missed it, Camilla. These are magnificent." "Yes, my husband is very proud of what he calls his coup." "As he should be." LeBlanc turned to the woman, took a sip of wine, and froze. Standing 15 meters behind her, near a large picture window and chatting with 3 gentlemen, stood the identical twin of Ariana Gold. Camilla Flores followed LeBlanc's gaze and laughed. "She has that effect on many men, Marcel. Would you like for me to introduce you?" Taking another sip of his wine, he shook his head. "No, she looks familiar. Who is she?" "The woman who helped us secure these magnificent prints." Her name? Amanda Goldstein. She's the curator of the Picasso Museum here in Barcelona. Obviously, I was mistaken about recognizing her. As he spoke, the woman turned her head in his direction and locked eyes with Marcel LeBlanc. Staring back at her, he raised his wine glass and smiled. She broke eye contact without acknowledging his gesture and returned to conversing with the three men. The reception lasted another 2 hours as LeBlanc prepared to leave. The twin of Ariana Gold walked up to him. "Have we met?" With his most gracious smile, LeBlanc replied, "Unfortunately, I do not believe we have." She offered her hand. "Amanda Goldstein." As they shook, he said, "Our host told me you're the curator of the Picasso Museum. Congratulations." "Thank you. I didn't catch your name." He glanced at his wristwatch. "Oh dear, I am late. Nice to have met you, Ms. Goldstein." He walked rapidly to the front door and slipped out into one of the narrow alleys of Barcelona's oldest section. While walking back to his hotel, Marcel LeBlanc decided to abandon his quest to steal the 14 prints by Pablo Picasso and return immediately to his estate in Monaco. "You cannot quit, Henri." "Why?" "You have a contract to fill." "Like I told you, I decided not to proceed with the acquisition. Since I've never received money for the job, I'm declaring our agreement null and void." There was silence on the call as LeBlanc waited for his contact to protest again. "Where will I find another like you, my friend?" "First, I'm not your friend. I am a tool you use to gather the product of your trade. I'm quite sure you know others who can do the job." "Yes, but you are the best." "Be that as it may, I am done." He pressed the end call icon and immediately removed the battery from the cell phone. He picked up the duffel bag packed earlier, locked the door of his mansion, and returned to the parked car in the estate's Circle Drive. 6.5 hours later, he boarded a plane in Lyon for a flight to Paris and then on to Dallas. Dallas, Texas. LeBlanc leaned against the front fender of his rental car. His arms were folded as he studied the massive 5-story structure. Finding the building containing the law firm of Abrams, Ledger & Gold required little more than entering the address into one of his cell phones he brought from Monaco. His appointment with the junior Arthur Gold would not occur for another hour. This gave him time to scrutinize the building. During the time since his last trip to the United States, he had altered his appearance. The loss of 20 pounds thinned his face. The addition of a neatly trimmed beard, shorter hair, eyes covered in blue-tinted contact lenses, and blocky black rim glasses resulted in a stranger staring back from a mirror. At the appointed time, LeBlanc entered the building and walked into a 3-story atrium with a reception desk manned by 5 young women. 4 sat in front of computer monitors with headsets talking rapidly to clients. The middle woman smiled as he approached. "May I help you?" "Yes." He handed her a business card and said, "Frank Dillon. I have an appointment with Arthur Gold at 2. His normally nondescript accent now contained a hint of Midwestern America. She handed the business card back. "Yes, Mr. Dillon, you are expected." She turned and pointed toward a row of 3 doors. "Take one of the elevators to the 4th floor. Someone will meet you and escort you to Mr. Gold's office." She handed him a clip-on name badge with the word visitor in black font on a white background. "Please wear this while you are in the building." After ascending to the appointed floor, the door opened to reveal a young professionally dressed woman. She said, "Good afternoon. Please follow me." When they reached the end of a hallway, she gestured for him to enter an open door. She then turned and walked away. Arthur Gold rose from behind his desk, smiled, and walked around to shake LeBlanc's hand. "Mr. Dillon, I'm Arthur Gold." They shook and he continued, "Please have a seat." The seat turned out to be a leather-bound wingback chair sitting in front of Gold's massive desk. The attorney took a relaxed position leaning on the front edge of his desk and said, "I understand you have foreign property you wish to sell." "I've been told you're one of the best international real estate lawyers in Dallas." "I am." "Good. I would like to discuss your firm handling the transaction." "We can do that. Where is this property?" "United Kingdom on the Irish Sea." "I see. May I ask how you obtained this property?" I am the executor for the estate of my mother's recently deceased brother. I have no desire to travel overseas to handle this mess. Therefore, I would like you to handle it." The lawyer gave LeBlanc a sly smile. "I assume you have all the necessary paperwork to give us authorization to pursue this matter?" "I do." "You mentioned mess. Is there a problem with the property?" "No, it is a coastal estate, and I really don't have the time to be flying back and forth to take care of it." "May I see the documentation?" LeBlanc raised a hand, palm toward the attorney. "We are not at that point yet, Mr. Gold." The attorney folded his arms. "I see. What questions do you have?" "My uncle had a fondness for New Orleans. On his last trip there, he stayed at the Bristol Hotel." LeBlanc could see one of Gold's eyebrows rise slightly. "Are you familiar with this property, Mr. Gold?" "Yes." "He met a woman there he told me was a concierge. Apparently he was quite smitten with her. Anyway, he left her a sizable amount of money in his will. I've tried to find her, but to no avail. Since you are familiar with the hotel, could you include finding this woman on behalf of the estate?" "Would be happy to, Mr. Dillon. What is this woman's name?" All my uncle knew was her first name, Ariana. This was LeBlanc's whole purpose for this masquerade of a meeting, to study Gold's face as he said the name Ariana. The man gave no recognition of the name, not even a small flinch. Nothing. No reaction at all. "That's not much to go on, but if she was the concierge, we can consult the HR records of the hotel." Standing, LeBlanc offered his hand. "Excellent. I will have my attorney prepare all the necessary paperwork and have it overnighted to your firm. Will that suffice?" "Yes. We didn't discuss fees, Mr. Dillon." "No. Should we?" "I don't want you to be surprised." "Very well. What is your fee?" 20% of the transaction amount." "That seems fair." The only response from Gold became a nod. LeBlanc waited for one of the 3 elevator doors to open on the 4th floor, his hands behind his back. He glanced over to the right of the elevators and froze. The painting he had shipped to the firm the day following the appearance of Ariana on the trail now hung at eye level 5 feet from where he stood. Ignoring the ding in one of the doors opening, he moved closer to the painting to examine it. No trace of the woman's image could be seen. He studied the brushstrokes to make sure it was the same painting. He then sensed someone standing beside him. "Haunting, isn't it?" Turning to his right, LeBlanc saw Arthur Gold staring at the painting. "Yes. Who is the artist?" "My great-grandfather, Abraham Goldstein." "It's not signed." "No, there's a reason for that." "Oh?" "Anti-Semitism in France during the late 19th century. He fled to the United States around 1895, changed his name to Gold, and never painted again." "That's a shame. He was very talented. Where did he settle?" "New Orleans." Dizziness swept over LeBlanc. In an attempt to hide his surprise at this revelation, he turned his head and cleared his throat. Arthur Gold continued, "We thought the painting lost forever. It arrived from an unknown benefactor several weeks ago. The hotel you mentioned, Bristol Hotel, at one time featured an art gallery he opened in 1901. His collection was priceless. He owned the hotel and the family still has ties to the property. Unfortunately, the gallery closed not long after he died just before World War II. What happened to the paintings?" Gold turned to face LeBlanc. "Unfortunately, there was a fire in the gallery. Many were destroyed, but some just disappeared. The family believes someone stole a number of the masterpieces and set fire to the gallery to cover up the theft. The police were no help. This piece was one of the paintings thought stolen." "When was the fire, Mr. Gold?" "The same day his wife Ariana died, about 1949. LeBlanc fell quiet as he looked toward the painting and then back at the attorney. "And the masterpieces have never been found?" "No." Gold tightened his lips. "It is said the thief stole a Cezanne, a Cassatt, and a Monet." He paused for a second. "Are you an admirer of fine art, Mr. Dillon?" The art thief did not answer as his head spun. Finally he said, I have been known to invest. An elevator door opened and a man in a business suit exited. Gold said, "There's my next appointment. I must go. I look forward to receiving the paperwork concerning the property." The attorney followed the other man, and LeBlanc slipped into the open elevator. On his way out of the front entrance, he glanced at the security panel at the front reception desk and recognized the system the building used. 1:14 a.m., Dallas, Texas. After successfully foiling the security system, LeBlanc knew how much time he would have before first responders would arrive. Using the stairs, he raced up to the 4th floor, removed the nightscape painting, and hurried back down. He broke his record for gaining entry and exiting a building. Exactly 4 minutes and 16 seconds from entrance to driving away from the scene. He was a mile away when the first police car arrived at the Abrams Ledger and Gold law firm. He returned the hot-wired car to the exact place where he appropriated it 2 hours prior to entering the building. Wearing a black hoodie and black jeans, he pulled the hood tight and walked away from the getaway car to his rental parked several blocks away. By the time the sun rose later that morning, LeBlanc sat in an airport concourse waiting on an early morning Air France flight to Paris. With luck and on-time flights, he would be back in his seaside estate by afternoon the following day. A month later. The day promised to be warm as Marcel LeBlanc sat in the seaside cafe perusing the newspaper Le Monde while consuming morning coffee and a croissant. As he chewed the last bite of the pastry, he failed to notice a woman approaching his outdoor table. As a rule, he kept his back to the sea so he would be aware of anyone approaching his location. Her timing could not have been better, as she sat down across from him as he turned a page in the newspaper. Looking up, he kept as neutral of an expression as possible despite his surprise. The woman said, "Bonjour, Monsieur LeBlanc." Putting down his paper, he tilted his head as he said, "Bonjour, madame. You have me at a disadvantage. May I ask your name?" "You may. Amanda Goldstein. We met several months ago at Camilla Flores' home in Barcelona." "Ah, yes. Now I remember. I learned of your name from Camilla. She told me you handle the exporting of their olive oil." LeBlanc kept his guard up as the woman talked. "It is excellent olive oil. Are you interested in becoming a client of my firm?" The woman's smile disappeared and she leaned over the table. In a lowered voice, she said, "I know who you really are. You stole something from my family, and I want it back." LeBlanc suddenly realized who this woman had to be. A smile slowly came to his lips. "Cut the theatrics, lady. Your real name is Ariana Gold, and you are from New Orleans." The woman straightened. "Ariana Gold was my grandmother. You are the man who stole her life." Without realizing his reaction, his jaw dropped and he stared wide-eyed at her. Recovering slightly, he said, "Now, how could I have done that?" "You stole the painting that kept her alive." LeBlanc took a deep breath and chuckled. "I am afraid you are delusional, Madame Goldstein, or whoever you believe you are. Do you admit taking a painting from the art gallery at the Bristol Hotel in New Orleans?" "I admit no such thing. Besides, the art gallery burned before I was even born, so how could I have stolen a painting from it?" "Let me ask you this. Did you see an image of Ariana appear and disappear in the painting?" LeBlanc remained silent. "From your expression and lack of protest, I will assume you did. My grandmother's spirit dwells in the painting. It was her favorite place to be, and it gave her strength. She would only emerge when someone showed interest in the painting. You were enamored with the piece and gave her the strength to emerge from the time you two spent together. When you stole the painting from the gallery, you robbed her of a place to replenish her strength. She tried to get back to the forest but never could. Now her spirit is lost forever, and it's your fault." A smirk appeared on LeBlanc. "Do you expect me to believe this fantasy of yours, Ms. Goldstein?" "I personally don't care if you believe me or not. Do you still have the painting?" LeBlanc stood and placed a €10 note under his coffee mug. "Have a nice day, madam." He walked swiftly toward his turbocharged Mini Cooper parked next to the cafe. She followed him, but he was in the car and speeding away before she could reach the vehicle. His route did not take him toward his seaside mansion. Instead, he traveled north until he intersected the A8 and took it west toward Nice. Occasionally, during his drive, he would study the rearview mirror looking for signs of being followed. He saw none. 40 minutes later, he parked the nimble little automobile in front of a home box storage unit. With his entry code and key, he entered the 2x10 meter storage unit and shut the door. He turned on the overhead light and surveyed the paintings he stored there. Still covered by the bubble wrap used to protect it during the flight from Houston to Lyon, France. He picked up the painting stolen from the wall of the law firm of Abrams, Ledger & Gold. After carefully removing the tape, he unwrapped it and examined the canvas. A figure standing by the edge of the stream stared back at him. It was Ariana Gold, her arms reaching for him. With the assistance of Interpol and the French gendarmerie, Amanda Goldstein gained access to the estate of Marcel LeBlanc. It had been several days since her encounter with the man at the seaside cafe, and he never returned home. During their search of the premises, they found records of a storage unit in Nice. The discovery of LeBlanc's Mini Cooper in the parking lot of the storage unit provided additional evidence allowing a search warrant to be signed by a judge in Nice. The storage locker of one Marcel LeBlanc was then opened by the authorities. Inside, they found multiple million-dollar works of art reported stolen over the past 2 decades. Amanda Goldstein, acting as a guide for the Interpol agents, assisted in taking inventory of the storage unit. When these articles were referenced against Interpol's stolen works of art database, they confirmed every article in the storage unit was a confirmed stolen piece of art. She also found a lost painting taken from the wall of an American law firm. It was a tranquil scene of a nightscape with the moon reflecting off the surface of a wandering stream. She noted, sitting next to the water were 2 figures holding hands, a woman and a man. Amanda displayed a slight smile and said, "Grandmama, it is good to see you home with your lover by your side."
"What's eating you?" the bartender asked. He wiped the bar with a rag, lifting napkin holders and bowls of peanuts so he could clean under them. The neon beer signs hanging overhead cast soft-edged splashes of color down onto the reflective wetness of the bar top. He waved at the last group of patrons as they pulled on their jackets and exited the bar. "Good night," he called after them. It was almost closing time. "Fucking Michelson, that's what," Lewis said. He hunched over a glass of whiskey, watching the ice melt into colorless swirls in the amber liquid. He tapped the base of his ring finger silently against the glass. Lewis was a short, overweight man with a sullen scowl that carved deep lines from the corners of his mouth down toward where his chin merged with his neck. His crew cut did little to conceal the patchy baldness spreading across his scalp. A roll of skin on the back of his neck prickled with short, stubbly hair. His tie hung loose and crooked around his unbuttoned collar, the weight of his belly pressed against his thighs. "Him again, huh?" The bartender dried his hands on his apron. "You bet your ass him again." Lewis thumped his fist on the bar, causing the pint glasses stacked in front of him to clink together. The bartender reached out and steadied them. "What is it this time?" Lewis groaned and massaged his temples as if trying to crush the memory out of existence. He blew out a sour breath, then opened his eyes. "Okay, you know what the real estate market's like these days, right? Pretty bad, right? Really fucking bad." Lewis grabbed a handful of peanuts from the small metal bowl on the bar and swirled them around in his hand. He popped a few in his mouth, then continued as he chewed. "So, there's this couple. Been working on him forever. Months. They've been out to see the unit 3-4 times already. Can't make up their goddamned minds. But finally, today, I get them to bite. They say they'll take it. Hey, that's great, right? That's good news. Fuck yeah, it is. Until... Lewis laughed bitterly, then took a sip of whiskey from his glass. Fucking Michelson. What do you do? I come back to the office. I've got the contract in hand, signed, holding it up like this. Lewis picked up a handful of bar napkins and held them aloft, showing them off to an imaginary crowd. It's a big deal. Huge. 7 figures. I slammed the papers down on my boss's desk. He slapped the napkins down on the bar to illustrate. I say, sold. Fuck you. Pay me. The bartender raised his eyebrows in surprise. You said that? Lewis shrugged. Yeah, it's all good. We're friends. Besides, there's this contest. He put out a bounty to break the curse and motivate us. The next person to sell a unit gets an extra 1% commission, which, on a 7-figure deal, that's a nice little bonus. Hell yeah, it is. So, what's the problem? What's the problem? Fucking Michelson, that's the problem. Lewis took another sip of his whiskey, wincing as it went down. He sucked in air through his teeth to cool his burning throat. He tapped the rim of his mostly empty glass, signaling for a refill. As the bartender poured another shot, Lewis pressed on with the story. So I say, fuck you, pay me. And my boss starts laughing. Everyone else starts laughing too, but, like, at me. I get this feeling in my stomach, like, oh no, here we go again. So I look around, spot Michelson. He holds up a contract like this in one hand. Lewis picked up a handful of napkins and held them up. Then, like this, in the other. He picked up a second pile of napkins in his other hand and held that up too. He beat you to it. Not once, Lewis said, letting one pile of napkins fall from his hand. But twice. He let go of the other pile. The napkins fluttered to the floor. 2 units. 2 units. 2 goddamned units. On the same day. On the same goddamn day. The bartender whistled. That's some luck. Isn't it? Lewis took a gulp of his whiskey. Fucking Michelson. Lewis stared into his drink with a faraway look, lost in thought. The bartender busied himself with rinsing some stemware that had been soaking in the sink. Finally, Lewis looked up. His eyes were glassy. You know what I don't get? Why 2? His voice was thick in his throat. Like, I get it. He beat me to it. Good for him. He sells 1, no problem. But 2? Why does he need 2? The guy's already got everything. Lewis tapped his ring finger absently against the glass. He sniffed. Give me that kind of luck for once, you know? Let me get 2. 1 for him, 2 for me. Is that too much to ask? It was a rhetorical question, but the bartender answered it anyway. Not at all. Lewis tossed back the last swallow of his whiskey, then placed the empty glass back on the bar. The bartender lifted the bottle of whiskey from the well and tilted it towards Lewis. One more? Lewis placed his hand over the glass and shook his head. Nah, close my tab. I'm broke. No worries, the bartender said. I got this one. Lewis removed his hand from his glass and slid it towards the bartender. In that case, make it a double. The bartender laughed. He filled the glass, then flipped a shot glass out from under the bar and filled that too. After dropping the whiskey bottle into the well, he picked up the shot and held it aloft in a toast. To Michelson, he proclaimed. May whatever luck comes to him come to you, ×2. Amen, Lewis said as he clinked his glass with the bartender. From your mouth to God's ears. Lewis hung up the phone and angrily scribbled a heavy line through another name on a typed list full of crossed-out names. Then he slammed the pen down on his desk and pushed the list away, disgusted. His chair creaked under his bulk as he leaned back and screwed his fists into his eyes. After a few seconds, he dropped his hands into his lap and stared at the ceiling. The fire sprinkler overhead peered down at him like a single blood-red eye. He wondered how big of a fire it would take to set the thing off. He pictured the flames licking up the walls, hungrily consuming the bulletin board full of real estate listings, the starburst-shaped sold stickers curling and blackening in the heat. He saw the Salesman of the Month award melting in its cheap acrylic frame, Dan Michelson's smug, smiling face bubbling and peeling as his photo disintegrated in the fire. A knocking sound broke Lewis out of his reverie. He sat up and reached for his pen, instinctively trying to look busy. One of the other salesmen, Duncan, was leaning into his cubicle. "You up for drinks tonight? Michelson's buying." A sour bolt of acid shot up the back of Lewis's throat. He swallowed it down. Fucking Michelson. "Not tonight." Lewis motioned to the list of names on his desk. "Lots of catching up to do." "Come on, who are you kidding? You're not that busy." Duncan laughed. "If Michelson's got time, anyone does." "Funny," Lewis said humorlessly. His lip curled into what he hoped was a smile. How nice for Michelson that he was able to take a break from being so goddamned perfect for a minute to lower himself to the rest of their level. Lewis suppressed the urge to flip his desk over. Instead, he said, "That's okay, I'm good." Duncan looked around furtively, then stepped into Lewis's cubicle and sat on the squat filing cabinet next to Lewis's desk. Lewis unconsciously wheeled his chair backward as Duncan leaned towards him and spoke with a lowered voice. "Listen, I know it's been hard since Rachel left. I get it. You want to shut down, stay inside, and say fuck the world. But that's the worst thing you can do. You need to get out there, have fun, and meet new people. It's been what, 6 months? 7. Lewis looked down at his hands. His thumb traced lazy arcs around the smooth skin where his wedding ring used to be. 7 months. That's a long time. And you just made a big sale. You deserve to get out, cut loose a little bit. Put some of that fat commission check to good use. That fat commission check didn't even make a dent in what I owe. You know how much a divorce lawyer costs?" Lewis wheeled his chair back up to his desk. He picked up the list of names. "Like I said, I'm busy." He picked up the phone and prepared to dial. "Okay." Duncan stood up. "You want me to make the hard sell? Here's the hard sell." He grabbed the back of Lewis's chair and pulled him away from the desk. Lewis dropped the phone. It dangled off the edge of the desk, spinning at the end of its cord near the floor. "Get your ass up, now." "Duncan, come on." "You want to get wheeled out of here in your chair? Because I'll do it. You're fat, but I'll do it." Lewis sighed. Duncan wasn't going to give up, and he knew it. The guy was relentless, in sales, in life, in everything. "All right," Lewis said. He slapped his hands on his thighs and reluctantly pressed himself to a standing position. "I'm up. You happy?" "Good man. Saves me a visit to the chiropractor. Now," he slung his arm around Lewis's shoulders. "You and I and the rest of the guys are going to have some drinks. Michelson's gonna pay, because fuck him. Then we're gonna head to the strip and win some money. And then we're gonna meet some ladies." "You mean hookers?" Duncan shrugged. "You say potato. The point is, we'll have fun, whether you like it or not. Deal?" "Deal." Lewis sat at the outside edge of the corner booth, nursing a mostly empty beer. Duncan was beside him, rambling to the other guys at the table about something or other. Lewis wasn't listening. He was too busy watching Michelson while trying not to stare. Dan Michelson was Hollywood handsome with an NFL chin, the best salesman on the team by a long shot. He was charming and popular, the kind of guy who needed a snorkel to keep from drowning in pussy. To make matters worse, he was a pretty nice guy. He probably saved puppies from burning buildings on his days off, for fun. Lewis hated him. At the moment, Michelson was leaning on the bar, hitting on a hot blonde in skin-tight leather pants and a teal crop top. Or was she hitting on him? It was hard to tell. She was doing that coy thing where she'd laugh, then look down at the floor, push a strand of hair behind her ear, and then look up while biting her lower lip. Classic fuck me move. The blonde motioned to the bartender, then held up 2 fingers. The bartender handed her 2 bottles of beer. She gave one to Michelson. Christ almighty, Lewis thought. She's buying him a drink. Unfucking believable. Lewis had never had a woman offer to buy him a drink in his entire life. Not once. And he never would. If it didn't happen when he was Michelson's age, when he was younger and thinner and had plenty of hair, it certainly wasn't going to happen now, when he was middle-aged, fat, and balding. Don't forget you're broke, his inner voice reminded him. Right, he was broke, too. And yet there was Michelson, already blessed with every possible advantage in life, having one more thing handed to him. 2, if you counted the blonde. She might as well have a flashing neon "fuck me" sign around her neck. Lewis drained the rest of his beer, then added his bottle to the growing collection of empties in the center of the table. A waitress arrived at the table with a tray of fresh drinks, as if on cue. She was a short and perky brunette with crystal blue eyes. Her name tag read Shelby. "Another round, boys?" she said. "Courtesy of Captain America over there." The guys at the table cheered. Michelson looked over at them and laughed, raising his beer in salute. The waitress distributed the drinks, leaving Lewis for last. She placed a bottle in front of him. "Thanks," he mumbled, without looking up. The waitress touched his shoulder and leaned close to his ear. "You look like you could use another," she whispered. She set a second beer in front of him. Her manicured fingernails gently grazed his neck as she drew her hand away. Goosebumps rushed up his forearms and into his rolled shirt sleeves. Lewis looked up at her, confused. "What?" He looked down at the pair of beers before him, then up at her again. "No, I don't—" "Shh," she said. "It's on me." She tucked a folded cocktail napkin into Lewis's front shirt pocket, then turned and walked away without another word. Lewis watched her go. What the hell was that about? He wondered. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the napkin. Written on it in pink ballpoint pen were the words, "Find me after." It was signed, Shelby. The tail of the Y looped into a tiny heart at the end. Lewis looked up again, searching the bar for the waitress, but she was gone. Lewis slid out of the booth. His co-workers piled out after him. They were all wasted. Duncan fake-punched Lewis in the stomach as he stood. Lewis flinched. Duncan laughed. "Gotcha," he slurred. "You know it," Lewis said distractedly. He scanned the crowd, looking for the waitress who had slipped in the napkin. "Let's go win some money," Duncan said. "Casino! Go, go, go!" He nudged Lewis towards the exit. "We got room for one more?" a syrupy voice said from behind. Amber says she's feeling lucky. Lewis looked over his shoulder. It was Michelson. He towered over Lewis by a good 6 inches, maybe 7. More, if you counted his perfectly coiffed hair. It was thick and lustrous, effortlessly perfect, as if every strand was self-aware and knew exactly where it should be. Even the strands that were out of place looked like God himself had carefully positioned them there. The blonde from the bar was tucked neatly under Michelson's arm. Her fingers were laced in his, her bright red nails glistening like a liquid under the overhead lights. Her other hand was tucked into the back pocket of his jeans. "Oh yeah, we do," Duncan said. He punched Michelson in the arm. Michelson laughed. Amber did too. Lewis felt a fresh surge of disgust coursing through his veins. He hadn't been with a woman since his wife left. But Michelson? He could have anyone he wanted, any time he wanted. He didn't even have to try. They flew at him from all directions, like moths to a street lamp. He probably had to swat him away with a tennis racket. Michelson thumped Lewis on the back. "How you doing, my man?" he asked jovially. "Having fun yet?" Lewis opened his mouth to respond, but Michelson didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he leaned close to Amber and said something into her ear, something Lewis couldn't hear. She laughed. Bitter bile bubbled up in the back of Lewis's throat, burning his esophagus. They were talking about him. He knew it. And whatever they were saying, it probably wasn't nice. Guys like Michelson didn't say nice things about guys like him to pretty girls. Lewis had dealt with Michelson's type his whole life. Super friendly, on the surface, until they decide you're inferior. Then they're shoving you in a locker, stealing your clothes while you're in the shower, or pantsing you in front of the whole gym class. "Let's go! The train's leaving!" Duncan yelled. Lewis stepped aside. "You know what? I'm gonna hit the head real quick. I'll catch up with you." Lewis waited until the group was gone, then pulled the waitress's note from his shirt pocket. He unfolded it covertly, down by his hip, and read it again. He wanted to reassure himself that he hadn't misread it, that it was real. It was. The words were unambiguous. "Find me after." He refolded the note, then headed to the end of the bar. His pulse was racing. He waved at the bartender. "Shelby?" he shouted over the music. The bartender's hands were full, carrying a rack of clean glasses. He thrust his chin, signaling for Lewis to turn around. He did. Shelby was behind him. She had traded her waitress uniform for civilian clothes, low-waisted jeans and a tight white t-shirt that contrasted with her tanned skin. Her dark hair was gathered into 2 braids, one on each side of her head. "Want some company?" she asked with a coy smile. Sure." Lewis's mouth suddenly felt full of dry cotton, like his tongue was wearing a sweater. He had no idea what was happening, no frame of reference for a random woman in a bar who was... what? Flirting with him? Is that what she was doing? Sure seemed like it. "Sweet!" Shelby turned and cupped her hands around her mouth. "Krista!" she shouted. She waved and beckoned with a "come here" gesture. Another girl emerged from the crowd. She seemed about Shelby's age, mid-20s, Lewis thought, and was dressed similarly in tight jeans and a white halter top. Her auburn hair was pulled into a ponytail at the back of her head. Shelby took Crystal's hand and then turned back to Lewis. "All right, let's go." "You want to do the honors?" Lewis asked. He was sitting on a plush velvet stool in front of a towering slot machine with the words "Money Madness" emblazoned on the front. Shelby sat on his knee, sipping a bright green drink through a skinny straw. Crystal stood behind him, leaning in close. He could feel her breasts pressed against his back. It felt nice. "Come on, big money!" Shelby called out. She slammed her palm down on the spin button. A too loud jingle blared from the machine's speakers, adding to the cacophony of the casino floor. Crystal whooped enthusiastically and then laughed. Lewis laughed too. He was having fun. The first wheel stopped on cherries. The second wheel stopped. Cherries again. "Let's go, let's go, let's go!" Shelby cheered. She crossed her fingers and closed her eyes. The third wheel stopped. Lemon. Shelby opened her eyes and let out a groan of disappointment. Crystal did too. Shelby pouted out her lower lip. "I suck at this," she whined. "I'm sorry." "Don't worry about it," Lewis said. "It's fine." "But we lost all your money," Crystal said. Sure enough, the digital balance readout on the machine read 0. "It's not all my money," Lewis said. He patted her thigh. "Here, get up." Shelby climbed off Lewis's knee and stepped out of the way as he stood. "You two stay here. I'll hit the ATM." "You sure?" Shelby asked. "Sure, I'm sure," Lewis said, with easy confidence. Shelby threw her arms around Lewis's neck and gave him a peck on the cheek. "You're the best," she said. Lewis blushed. "Be right back." He walked down the long aisle of slot machines, then looked back towards Shelby and Crystal. They were both seated on the velvet stool, sharing it half and half, looking at their phones and waiting for him to return. Shit, he said under his breath. He had lost way more than he planned, way more than he could afford, first at the blackjack table, then at poker, and now at the slots. He rarely gambled, which was why. He was bad at it. In fact, he had never won much of anything, ever. He knew he should call it a night and cut his losses, but the truth was he didn't want to. He was having more fun than he'd had in a long time. It was worth it. He got to the ATM, inserted his card, and typed in his PIN. His finger hovered over the withdrawal button for a moment, before course-correcting to hit the check balance button instead. The machine processed the request, then displayed his current balance. Negative $370. Ouch. Suddenly, a loud cheer rose from the bank of slot machines nearby. A chorus of bells and chimes started ringing. More voices joined in the cheering. People began to applaud. Lewis froze. His stomach dropped. He didn't even need to see to know who it was. Fucking Michelson. It had to be. Lewis turned around. Sure enough, Michelson stood in front of a slot machine with jackpot flashing across the screen in a dozen different fonts and colors. A red police light on top of the machine was spinning gleefully. Michelson's fists were thrust toward the ceiling in celebration. Amber, the blonde from the bar, gave him a two-handed high five, then wrapped her arms around his neck. Her hands entwined in his hair as she kissed him deeply. Meanwhile, the digits on the jackpot counter grew and grew, eventually topping out at $10,000. Lewis pivoted back to the ATM, away from Michelson's celebration. He felt like he was going to throw up. How could one guy be so blessed while another, himself, could be so cursed? Was God playing favorites? Is that what it was? Or was it that certain advantages conferred other advantages, which conferred still more advantages, and so on until life was throwing money and pussy at you all day and night? Lewis wondered what his life would have been like if he had been born taller, thinner, or smarter. Maybe he'd be the one winning all the time. Maybe his bank account would be a positive number. Maybe Rachel wouldn't have left him for... "Hey, everything okay?" a sweet voice asked. A hand touched his arm. Lewis turned. Shelby and Crystal were behind him. "You disappeared," Shelby said. "We thought you ditched us," Crystal added with a wink. "Yeah, no, I'm fine," Lewis said. "And just got distracted by my friend over there." He nodded his head towards Michelson. "Lucky guy," Shelby said. "Yeah, sure is." His smile felt like a mouthful of porcelain tiles that might shatter at any moment. "Let me just..." He indicated the ATM. Shelby got the hint. "Oh, yeah, do what you've got to do. We'll be over here." The girls walked away, leaving Lewis alone. He pulled out his wallet, replaced his ATM card, and withdrew a Visa card instead. He inserted it into the ATM, then selected the cash advance option. His finger lingered over the number pad as he debated how much to withdraw. Fuck it. He punched in $500 and hit enter. The machine dispensed a pile of $20 bills. Lewis folded them into a thick wad and shoved them into his front pocket. He walked back over to where Shelby and Crystal were waiting. "All right, where to?" "Right here." Shelby pointed to the slot machine she was standing next to. "I have a good feeling about this one." The graphic on the front of the machine featured a man in a tuxedo leaning against the side of a limousine. Clinging to each of his arms was a gorgeous woman. One was a pouting Marilyn Monroe type in a tight pink gentleman prefer blonde's gown. The other was a ripoff of Breakfast at Tiffany's era Audrey Hepburn, complete with glasses, cigarette holder, and diamond-studded crown. The man's eyebrow was arched, as if to say, "Ain't this the life?" Behind him, triple spotlights illuminated hilltop letters that mimicked the Hollywood sign. They spelled out the name of the machine. Double Lucky. Double ripoff is more like it, Lewis thought. He wasn't going to say that to Shelby, though. No point in spoiling a good thing. Instead, he pulled out the bundle of bills from the ATM, peeled off a fresh 20, and inserted it into the machine. The digital balance readout updated to read $20. "Okay, whose turn is it?" "Yours," Shelby replied. She gave Lewis a peck on the cheek. She responded to his surprised expression, "For good luck." Crystal stepped closer and placed a kiss on Lewis's other cheek. "Make it a double." From your mouth to God's ears, Lewis thought. Then he pressed the spin button. A rousing big band tune blasted from the machine. The wheels accelerated into a blur. The first wheel stopped. Double jackpot. The second wheel stopped. Double jackpot again. "Come on, come on!" Shelby squealed. Crystal bounced and clapped excitedly. Lewis's heart was beating like a boxer's speed bag. The third wheel kept spinning and spinning. Finally, it stopped. Double jackpot. Pandemonium. Shelby and Crystal started screaming and jumping up and down in celebration. Every light on the slot machine began to flash. The speakers blared a celebratory big band tune. A pair of police sirens began to wail. An artificial ching-ching-ching sound effect blasted from all directions, emulating the sound of a slot machine paying out a fuck-ton of quarters. The hilltop letters flashed on and off in an alternating pattern. Double, lucky, double, lucky, double, lucky. "You won!" Shelby threw her arms around Lewis's shoulders. Crystal embraced him too. Lewis just stared dumbly at the screen. "I won?" he asked in a distant voice. His face was blank, unbelieving.
Yes, you won,
Crystal said.
Look!
She pointed at the digital jackpot counter as the numbers grew and grew. $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Double jackpot. That's where they stopped. Twice what Michelson had just won. For a brief moment, the bartender's words from last night drifted through Lewis's mind like a wisp of smoke. Then it was gone. May whatever luck comes to him come to you, ×2. I won, Lewis said again, more sure this time. Then, with growing enthusiasm, I won! A burst of delirious laughter escaped from his lips. It sounded something like happiness. Felt a little like it too. The crowd that had previously surrounded Michelson surged towards Lewis. They clapped and cheered and high-fived each other. Duncan pushed through the crowd and yelled in Lewis's face, "Woo!" He grabbed Lewis's shoulders and shook him back and forth. Lewis's head bobbed on his neck. Yes, baby, yes! Duncan pounded a fist on Lewis's chest. That's what I'm talking about! Then he threw an arm around Lewis's shoulder and hollered to the crowd, This is my man right here! The crowd cheered even louder. He put Lewis in a friendly headlock and said into his ear, There's your fuck you, pay me. Am I right? Lewis ran his hand over his stubbly hair, wiping away a slick of perspiration that had appeared on his scalp. He felt a swell of emotion rising in his chest. The muscles in his face felt taut. He exhaled a long, shuddering breath. It felt good to win for once. It had been so long. He made a mental note to thank Duncan for forcing him to go out. Duncan was right. He needed it. Lewis scanned the crowd. He wanted Michelson to see him and know he could be a winner too. Not everything in life always went to the quarterback or the class president. That the guy from the math club could get the girl too. Or girls, Lewis thought as he looked at Shelby and Crystal. Plural. Unfortunately, Michelson wasn't in the crowd. Instead, Lewis spotted him across the casino lobby, walking away with his arm around Amber's waist. She clutched his tanned, muscled bicep, her head leaning against his shoulder. Lewis felt a sudden panic. Michelson wasn't even looking. He wasn't going to see. It would all be for nothing. The whole moment would be lost. Hey! Lewis called over the din. Hey, Michelson! Michelson stopped. He looked around, vaguely aware that someone had called his name. Lewis waved his arms. Over here! Michelson spotted Lewis. He crinkled his brow and nodded as if to say, What's up? Check it out! Lewis shouted. I won! Double jackpot! Michelson's lips said, Wow. He gave Lewis a thumbs up. Then he pointed at the top of Amber's head, then towards the elevators. He mouthed, I'm gonna go. Lewis made an okay sign, then watched as Michelson escorted Amber into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, Lewis was suddenly filled with an almost unbearable sense of self-loathing. So he won. So what? Winning didn't take any skill. It was luck, pure and simple. Some random number generator in a computer somewhere spit out the right combination, and he was the dumb fuck who was lucky enough to be sitting in front of the machine when it happened. Tomorrow, he'd go right back to being Ron Lewis, loser for life. It didn't matter how much money he won. He was worthless. That's not true, another voice in his head countered. What about Shelby and Crystal? That wasn't just dumb luck. No computer made Shelby slip him that note. She and Crystal could have bailed hours ago, but they didn't. That had to mean something. It had to. "You'll still be here when I get out?" Lewis asked. To claim his winnings, he had to go with a casino manager to fill out some paperwork in an office somewhere. The casino was authorized to pay up to $10,000 in cash, so Michelson could just walk away with his prize. But the size of Lewis's jackpot meant the casino had to cut him a check instead, and that would take time. Shelby looked at Crystal. Crystal shrugged and nodded. "Fine with me." Shelby replied, "Sure, we've got nowhere else to be. Where should we meet you?" Lewis looked around for a good meeting spot. There was a piano lounge on the other side of the lobby. "How about in there?" "We'll be there," Shelby said. "Promise?" "Promise." Lewis watched them glide across the lobby and disappear into the lounge. "God, they're beautiful," he thought. Then he walked over to the casino manager waiting nearby. "They're with you?" the manager asked. "Yup." "Both of them?" "Yup." "Nice," the manager said, with a knowing nod and a sly smile. "Very nice." Lewis felt a little bump of something unfamiliar jolt through his bloodstream. He wasn't used to another guy reacting to him with... what exactly? Was it envy? Or at least admiration? Something like that. It was probably just a tiny coffee creamer-sized serving of how Michelson felt all the time. But it was nice. I could get used to this, Lewis thought. He hustled to the casino office and rushed through the paperwork as quickly as possible, trying desperately to hang on to the rapidly evaporating contrails of happiness left behind from his win. His leg jittered and bounced while he waited for his check to be cut. He looked at his watch so many times that his shoulder ached. It took almost an hour. It felt like forever. By the time he was done, Lewis's thin veneer of confidence had worn off, leaving a dull, rusted panic in its place. He took the check without even looking at it, stuffed it into his pocket, then tore out of the casino office and made a beeline for the piano lounge. The lounge was a tiny space with a short curved bar and a few cocktail tables arranged around a large piano. It was dimly lit with blue light that spilled from under the bar's edge. Aside from the bartender, the place was empty. Lewis's stomach fell off a cliff, turning over and over as it plunged into darkness. The girls had ditched him. They had promised to stay, and they were gone. Just like his wife, his dad, and everyone who fucking mattered in his life. And yet, he kept falling for it, repeatedly, every goddamned time. He felt so stupid. "Hey!" The bartender waved his towel to get Lewis's attention. "You Lewis?" Lewis pointed at his chest. "Me? Yeah, I'm Lewis." "They'll be right back. They went to the bathroom." Lewis's stomach bounced off the floor and up into his throat. He laughed a little, relieved. "Okay, great. Thought I lost him." He took a seat at one of the cocktail tables. A minute later, Shelby and Crystal returned. They saw him and walked over to where he sat. "Hey, did the bartender..." Shelby started. "Yeah, he told me." "Okay, good." She pulled out a chair and sat down. Crystal did too. "We didn't want you to think we bailed." "No, of course not," Lewis lied. "I would never think that." "So, now what?" Shelby asked. She looked at Crystal. "Up to you," Crystal said. Lewis rubbed his palms back and forth along the tops of his thighs. His hands were freezing, but sweating. He was more nervous than ever about anything in his life. He had an idea. It came to him while he was waiting in the casino office, and he spent the rest of the time trying to decide what to do about it. He had never thought about it before, Never even considered a possibility for someone like him. But what the hell? He was feeling lucky. Maybe tonight would be the night. Yeah, so I was thinking. His voice seemed to be disconnected from his brain. It was like he was floating outside his body, watching himself talk. He couldn't believe what he was saying. The casino comped me a room for the night, so I thought maybe you two might want to come up and hang out or something. Shelby and Crystal exchanged glances. Shelby shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I don't know if that's such a good idea. Lewis's stomach tightened. He felt the overwhelming urge to retreat, to just curl up into a ball and roll out of the bar in shame. But then he pictured Michelson, so confident, heading to the elevators with Amber, a girl he had met only hours before, wrapped around his finger. Michelson wouldn't give up that easily, would he? Fuck no, he wouldn't. Why not? Lewis asked. We've been having a good time, right? Let's keep it going. Yeah, we have, but... Shelby struggled to find the right words. But we're not like... She looked at Crystal with a help-me expression. It's just a no, okay? Crystal said. She started to stand, looking at Shelby with a pointed glare. We should go. Yeah. Shelby stood up, too. She slung her purse over her shoulder. Yeah, it's getting late. She extended her hand to Lewis. It was nice meeting you, though. Lewis sat back in his chair and folded his arms over his chest. So that's it, then, he said, looking from Shelby to Crystal and back to Shelby. Shelby awkwardly lowered her hand. Crystal spoke up. Look, your friend didn't say anything about... Shelby bumped Crystal with her elbow. Crystal rolled her eyes. Can we just go? She said to Shelby. It's enough already. Lewis sat up straight in his chair. Friend? What friend? Nothing, Shelby said. Don't listen to her. No, tell me. What friend? What did he say? Was it Duncan? Lewis's heart was trying to kick its way out of his ribcage. His face felt hot. His eyes burned. What did Duncan tell her? And why? He paid us, all right? Crystal tugged Shelby's arm. I told you this guy's a creep. Let's go. Shelby ignored Crystal. I'm sorry, Shelby said to Lewis. I'm just a waitress. I'm not a... You know, I don't do those kinds of things, not for money. And Crystal's just my friend. I asked her to come. Lewis was staring past her into space. She tried to make eye contact with him. I really did have a nice time, though. So, what do you do for money? Lewis asked coldly. His eyes narrowed and connected with Shelby's. She took a step backward, as if pushed by an unseen hand. The expression on her face turned from one of sympathy to one of fear. Good, Lewis thought. Hey, it's not our fault you can't get girls on your own, Crystal sneered. Crystal? Shelby spun at her, mortified. She pointed out of the lounge at the lobby. Wait out there, please, she snapped. You're not helping. But go! Crystal snatched her jacket off the back of the chair and stormed away. This is so stupid. Shelby watched her friend leave, then turned back to Lewis. His elbows were on the cocktail table. His face was in his hands. Hey, listen, Shelby said. I'm sorry, okay? That was out of line. Who paid you? Lewis asked quietly. His hands muffled his voice. He dragged his hands down his face. They fell into his lap, limp. He tilted his head back, his face towards the ceiling. His eyes were closed. Was it Duncan? Duncan? Shelby's eyes rolled upwards as she tried to remember the name. No, it was your friend, you know, the guy who... Captain America, who bought your drinks. Michael something. Lewis opened his eyes. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Fucking Michelson? That motherfucker? He tried to speak, but his voice was just a whisper. Michelson, he said. Yeah, that's it. He said he felt bad. Something about a bonus you didn't get? He wanted you to have a good time and asked if we would help. He said you've had a tough run of it lately and deserved some fun. She tried to catch Lewis's eyes again. He was trying to help you. Lewis leaned forward and glared at Shelby. His eyes looked like two black marbles, cold and lifeless. His voice was a low growl. How much did he pay you? Shelby looked at the floor. Her cheeks were damp. 1,000. Lewis laughed bitterly. 1,000, he repeated. Each, Shelby finished. Lewis looked down at his hands. They were clenched into fists. His knuckles were white. Get out. Shelby wiped her eyes with the heels of her hands, smearing her makeup. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to... Get out! Lewis yelled. He pounded both fists down on the cocktail table. The heavy mirrored tabletop shattered under the blow, disintegrating into a shower of broken glass. Shelby recoiled, then ran from the piano lounge. She didn't look back. Lewis held his hands up in front of his face. Shards of glass were embedded in his flesh. Dark rivers of blood ran down his wrists and dripped onto the floor. He felt no pain, only rage. He was angry at the girls for deceiving him, for making him think they were there for him instead of the money. He was angry at himself for falling for it. And he was angry at Michelson for, well, everything. A blur of motion drew Lewis's attention toward the bar. The bartender had picked up a phone on the wall. He kept one eye on Lewis as he started to dial. Lewis saw him. Hey! He shouted. He jumped up, sending the chair tumbling backward. He pushed the remains of the broken table out of his way. It crashed to the floor. Lewis's shoes crunched on the broken glass. He strode towards the bar, plunging one of his bloodied hands deep into his pocket as he went. The bartender dropped the phone and raised his hands in front of his chest, palms out. Please, don't... Lewis pulled out the thick wad of 20s he had withdrawn from the ATM earlier. He flung them at the bartender. The bartender flinched, shielding his face with his hands. A spray of blood droplets flew through the air with the money, peppering the bartender's white shirt as the cash hit him in the chest and dropped to the floor. Lewis was gone when the bartender lowered his hands away from his face. Lewis sat in his car with the engine running. His headlights were off. The roof of the casino parking lot was dotted with pools of light, surrounded by wide spans of inky darkness. Lewis's car was in the shadows. His was one of only 2 vehicles remaining on the roof level. The other was a Tesla. Michelson's Tesla. It was parked at the opposite end of the parking garage, near a large assembly of massive industrial fans that provided ventilation for the casino. The fans' roar was loud enough for Lewis to hear them, even with his windows closed. They made a droning hum that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. Lewis's hands were on the steering wheel. His breathing was calm, steady. The blood on his forearms had dried into twisted brown smears. Tiny shards of glass still poked from his skin. He ignored them. His eyes were fixed on a single spot across the garage, a blue metal door under a glowing green sign that read, "Exit." Lewis wasn't sure how long he'd been sitting there. It seemed like hours. The sky to the east was a filthy, grayish-yellow color that reminded Lewis of his father's tobacco-stained teeth. It was the beginning of sunrise, he supposed. He'd be expected to be in the office in a few short hours. He didn't care. He would never be going to work again. The blue metal door opened. Lewis sat forward in his seat, suddenly alert. A figure was silhouetted in the doorway, backlit against the light from the stairwell. Lewis couldn't tell who it was, but then he heard the chirp of a car alarm being deactivated. The taillights on Michelson's Tesla blinked twice. It was him. Lewis watched as Michelson strolled towards the Tesla, spinning the key fob around his index finger as he walked. His stride was casual and confident, the walk of a man on an unbroken path whose perfect life was unfolding perfectly before him, every day proceeding exactly as planned. Everything was right for him. Everything worked to his advantage. There was nothing out of place, nothing incomplete, no desire unfulfilled. Every pitch was a strike, every at-bat a home run. Every game is a perfect game. A life unspoiled by defeat, disappointment, or loss. Until now. As Michelson passed in front of Lewis's car, Lewis flipped on his high beams. Michelson froze, suddenly blinded by the searing light. He threw up his forearm in front of his face to shield his eyes from the glare. His expression was confused, uncomprehending. Lewis slammed his foot down on the gas pedal, smashing it to the floor. His tires squealed. Black smoke poured out from under his rear bumper. The car lurched forward, accelerating towards Michelson. Michelson's reaction was delayed. Maybe he was still buzzed from a long night of drinking, or maybe his brain just couldn't quite fathom what was happening. By the time his legs started moving, Lewis's car was already closing in on him. Michelson ran. He sprinted straight at first. Then he zigzagged to the left, then to the right. Lewis tracked his every move, keeping him dead center between his headlights. Michelson threw a look over his shoulder. His face was a mask of abject terror. He was going to die, and he knew it. Just as Lewis's car was upon him, Michelson dove to his right. The car hit him while airborne, throwing him over the hood. His shoulder collided with the windshield, shattering it into a spiderweb of fractured glass. The impact sent him over the roof, his body cartwheeling sideways into the bank of industrial fans. A horrible grinding sound echoed through the parking garage as his unconscious body smashed through the fan's protective grating and into the powerful blades inside. Lewis's car continued straight, heading for the edge of the parking garage roof. He never slowed down. Lewis was awake. There hadn't been any feeling of waking up or coming to. No gradual transition from unconscious to conscious. It was like someone had just flipped a switch. There was nothing, and then there was something. He realized he could hear noises, beeps and hisses, and the gentle drone of an air conditioner or a fan, but he couldn't see anything. Everything was black. He heard a voice, a man's voice. It was muffled and distorted, like it was being played on toy speakers from a vinyl record that had warped in the heat. He didn't recognize the voice, but he understood the words. "Mr. Lewis, can you hear me?" Lewis tried to speak, but his throat felt like he had swallowed a bale of barbed wire. He suddenly realized that he was choking. Something seemed to be in his throat, gagging him. He panicked, trying to lift his hand to pull out whatever it was so he could breathe. But he couldn't move. As hard as he tried, he couldn't lift his arms. Either of them. He didn't understand. What was happening? Was he tied down, or... With dawning horror, Lewis tried to move his legs. He couldn't feel them either. Oh my God, Lewis thought. I'm paralyzed. He tried to sit up, but a strong pair of hands pressed on his shoulders, holding him down. Hey now, take it easy, just relax, a different voice said, closer to his face. This one belonged to a woman. Its tone was firm, but kind. Who are you? Lewis wanted to scream. Where am I? He lifted his head and tried to sit up again, but the hands held him down. Then he realized he could feel the hands on his shoulders. If he was paralyzed, he wouldn't be able to feel them touching him, right? Lewis relaxed. He settled back into the mattress. Maybe he wasn't paralyzed after all. As he stopped struggling, the hands released their pressure on his shoulders. The man's voice spoke again. Mr. Lewis, I'm Dr. Grace. If you can hear me, can you nod? Lewis nodded. Great, the doctor said. Do you know where you are? Lewis shook his head. No, he croaked. His throat felt like it was full of broken glass. Okay, you're in Our Lady of Mercy Hospital. We just removed a tube from your throat, so it's best if you don't try to talk just yet. It's going to be pretty raw for a while. Lewis nodded again. He swallowed, then winced. It hurt like hell. Do you remember anything about what happened? Lewis shook his head again, but as soon as he did, a series of memories flickered across his mind like still frames from an old-time flipbook. The casino, the girls, the double jackpot. The cocktail table shattered. The car. Michelson. Fucking Michelson. Now a different voice spoke. Another man. One he recognized. Hey, Lewis, it's Mike Duncan from work. You remember me? Lewis nodded. He remembered Duncan. He sat in the next cubicle over at the office. I just stopped by to see how you were doing and, well, I guess I got lucky. The doctor says this is your first time awake since the accident. The accident? Lewis thought. So they thought it was an accident. That was good. Water, Lewis whispered. The woman's voice spoke. Maybe a nurse? It's too soon to give you water, but I can give you some ice if you'd like. Lewis nodded. Please. Coming right up. He heard the woman walking away, her footsteps muted on the tile floor. I'll give you a few minutes with your friend, the doctor said. Thanks, doctor, Duncan responded. Heavier footsteps. Then a door closed and latched with a click. Can you talk? Duncan asked. Lewis opened his jaw and moved his tongue around. It felt foreign to him, like a piece of raw meat in his mouth. He swallowed again. Flames tore at his esophagus. Hey, he managed to whisper. His voice sounded like a handful of crinkling straw. What happened? Oh, man, Duncan said. His voice was shaky. Well, there was an accident. But you're okay. You made it through. Michelson, Lewis croaked. He made it too, Duncan said. His voice cut out, choked by a sob. I'm sorry. Man, this is so fucked up. He's okay? Lewis asked. Duncan coughed out a mortified laugh despite himself. Not really. He got chewed up pretty badly. Lost an arm, a leg, an eye. His whole right side is just... it's bad. He barely made it, and he's not out of the woods yet. He's got a long way to go. Years, they said. Lewis felt a wave of familiar anger boiling inside him. Of course Michelson survived, Lewis thought with bitter sarcasm. Of course he did. Lewis was such a loser that he couldn't even murder someone without fucking it up. But then, a different thought occurred to him. Dying was easy, almost too easy. But surviving was a bitch. Surviving meant Michelson would have to live the rest of his life handicapped, disfigured, and partially blind, the whole time knowing what he used to be, what he had lost, what he could never be again. The more Lewis thought about it, the better the whole thing sounded. Then Duncan spoke again, interrupting Lewis's internal monologue. Rachel came to see you. The words hit Lewis head on, crushing him like a car in one of those crash tests where someone drives a Hyundai into a brick wall. His heart seemed to stop for a second, suspended in midair, before tripping over itself to regain its rhythm. Rachel? His Rachel? He felt a sob rising in his throat. The very idea that she was there for him, that she came back after everything that had happened between them, after everything he had said, everything he had done, was overwhelming. Maybe she still loved him. Maybe there was still a chance for them after all. She's here? Lewis asked, his voice wavering on the edge of tears. Duncan was silent. Lewis asked again, more clearly this time. Duncan, is she here? No, he said quietly. Not today. She came when she heard what happened, but she left. She didn't want to see you like this. Like what? There was another long silence. Finally, Duncan spoke. Maybe I should get the doctor. Lewis heard a chair creak as Duncan stood. Duncan, wait! Like what? Lewis asked again. What's happening? Am I paralyzed? Duncan didn't answer. Lewis heard the door open, followed by the soft footsteps of the nurse's sneakers and the louder clacks of the doctor's loafers. Duncan put a hand on Lewis's shoulder. I'm gonna run. It's good to see you. Stay strong, brother. Lewis tried to reach up and pat Duncan's hand, but he still couldn't move his arm. He settled for a nod. Thanks for coming, Mike. Duncan's footsteps receded out of the room. Then Lewis felt the cold wetness of ice on his lips. Here you go, the nurse said softly. Some ice for you. Lewis opened his mouth. The nurse spooned some soft, tasteless ice chips into his mouth. They dissolved on his tongue, sending a trickle of freezing water down his shredded throat. It felt good. Thanks, he whispered. Lewis heard the sound of a wheeled stool being rolled closer. It squeaked as the doctor sat. Mr. Lewis, we need to talk. Am I paralyzed? Lewis asked. No, the doctor confirmed. You're not paralyzed. Luckily, the damage from the crash didn't affect your spine. You had a severe concussion and some serious swelling in your brain, but we managed that effectively. There should be no permanent brain damage. Lewis felt a wave of relief. No permanent damage. Good. Good. The doctor continued. The accident was very serious, but between the airbags, the seatbelt, and the other safety features, you made it out relatively unscathed, considering. Lewis heard paper turning, as if the doctor was flipping through his chart. Concussion, severe contusions and lacerations, stitches and staples in your scalp, a few broken ribs, broken tibias left and right. I know this sounds like a lot, but given the severity of the accident, it's incredible that you survived it at all. You're a very lucky man, Mr. Lewis. He heard the doctor close his file. Do you remember anything about what happened?
Not much.
Lewis's thoughts turned inwards as he tried to remember. The longer he was awake, the more his memory started to fill in, like a roll of film developing in a chemical bath. There was still a thin gauze over the whole night, a milky cataract that obscured some of the details, but he began to remember more distinctly the events that preceded the crash. The note was in his pocket. She and her friend are coming with him to the casino, winning the double jackpot. The waitress gives him the extra beer. Then, the piano lounge. The embarrassment. The betrayal. Michelson had paid them. He thought Lewis was so pathetic that the only way a girl would hang out with him was if she was paid to do it. Fucking Michelson, he thought for the 1000th time. We did everything we could, but Lewis realized that the doctor was still talking. He hadn't been listening. All his mental energy had gone to piecing together the memories of that night.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Lewis said.
It's hard to focus.
Yes, of course, the doctor said. I understand this is a lot to process. I can come back later when you're feeling stronger.
No, it's all right. Just say that again. Before we did everything we could.
Okay. The doctor took a deep breath and exhaled.
I was saying that you were lucky to survive the accident.
You and Mr. Michelson are both very, very lucky. But after... The doctor's voice wavered, as if on the edge of tears.
Mr. Lewis, I'm so sorry. We did everything.
There was a click in his throat as he swallowed a hitching breath.
We did everything we could, but the infection was just too aggressive. It was resistant to antibiotics, to every intervention we tried.
A heavy veil of dread draped over Lewis like a lead blanket. He could feel it pressing on his chest, compressing his lungs, and collapsing his ribcage. Terror tightened around his throat like a noose, threatening to strangle him.
The infection was pervasive and extensive,
the doctor continued. We fought it with everything we had, but in the end, we had no choice but to... The doctor took another shaky breath.
But to amputate.
Amputate. The word shot through Lewis's head like a hollow-point bullet, shredding his mind into jagged ribbons of horror as it exploded through his skull.
My arms,
he managed to say. Yes, the doctor replied. I'm sorry. Your arms. And your legs. And your eyes. An animal groan started building in Lewis's throat. The sound of incomprehensible grief, terror, regret, and every one of the darkest emotions of human existence, of any existence, all combined into a single, horrible wail. The beeping from Lewis's heart monitor grew faster. The room's sounds grew elastic, elongating and contracting, the volume rising and falling. His breath came in short, choppy gasps. He couldn't breathe. He was suffocating.
The doctor's voice broke through the swells of static pulsing in Lewis's ears. I understand how difficult. If there's someone we can call, a spouse or significant other. The room's sounds receded into silence, like a passing police siren trailing off into the distance. All that was left was the sound of Lewis's heartbeat, his breathing, and then a voice, his own.
Give me that kind of luck for once, you know? Let me get 2. 1 for him, 2 for me. Is that too much to ask? Not at all, the disembodied voice of the bartender said. Lewis heard the gurgling sound of whiskey pouring into a glass. A double. To Michelson, the bartender proclaimed. May whatever luck comes to him come to you, ×2. Amen, Lewis said. The clink of their glasses resonated like a chime in a cathedral. From your mouth to God's ears. One last thought slipped through the darkness as Lewis drifted away into unconsciousness. Fucking Michelson.
Chilling tales for dark nights.